For thousands of years, the gentle teachings of Zen have whispered the same quiet truth that life moves with its own rhythm, and peace is found not in control, but in surrender. These stories are not lessons to study or rules to follow. They are simple invitations to soften, to breathe, and to trust that the universe always knows the way. Before we begin, take a moment to notice where you are. Feel the ground beneath you, the air moving in and out of your lungs. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath become slower, deeper, calmer. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to become. You are already right where you are meant to be. As you listen to these gentle Buddhist stories, allow them to unfold like ripples on still water. Each one carries a piece of ancient wisdom, quiet reminders that life does not need to be forced or controlled. The river flows without asking how. The wind moves without needing a plan. In the same way, the universe flows through you, moment by moment, breath by breath. These stories are for those who are tired of holding on, for those who wish to rest in the quiet trust that everything is already unfolding as it should. As we move together through this journey, may you feel the soft rhythm of surrender rising within you, not as an idea to understand, but as a peace that gently awakens in your heart. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the calm waiting beneath your thoughts. The universe is already carrying you. Let's begin. The sun was setting behind the old monastery, painting the courtyard in shades of amber and fading gold. Crickets began their slow chorus in the reeds beyond the garden walls. A young monk walked quietly toward the meditation hall, his robe brushing the ground with a whisper. Inside, an old master sat beside a small table, pouring tea into a cup that steamed gently in the evening air. The young monk bowed deeply before speaking. "Master," he said softly, "I have been practicing for many years, but I still cannot find peace. My mind is always full. I try to control my thoughts, my breath, even my life itself. But the harder I try, the more restless I become. Please teach me how to control my life." The master looked at him for a long time without a word. His eyes were kind, yet they seemed to look straight through the young monk's question, as if he were listening to something deeper beneath it. At last, he smiled and gestured to the cushion across from him. "Sit," he said. "Let us have tea." The young monk obeyed, folding his legs carefully beneath him. He watched as the master began to pour tea into a small clay cup before him. The warm liquid rose slowly, reaching the brim, but the master did not stop. The tea began to spill over, trickling down the sides of the cup, soaking the tray beneath it. The young monk watched in confusion until finally he could hold back no longer. "Master," he said, "the cup is full. It can hold no more." The master continued to pour a moment longer, then slowly set the teapot down. The air between them was filled with the scent of steeped leaves and silence. Then the master looked up. "You come to me full," he said gently. "Full of opinions, full of striving, full of ideas about how life should be. How can I show you peace if your cup is already overflowing?" The monk lowered his eyes. The meaning of the master's gesture settled slowly into his heart, but another question stirred within him. "Then, master," he whispered, "how do I empty my cup?" The master poured a fresh cup of tea and handed it to the monk. "Drink," he said simply. The monk obeyed. The warmth spread through him, grounding him in the present moment. For the first time in many days, he realized he was simply breathing, not controlling, not planning, just breathing. When he finished, the master smiled. "When you stop trying to control," he said, "the tea will find its own stillness." The night deepened around the temple. The sound of wind moving through the bamboo filled the air like a soft lullaby. The monk stayed sitting long after the master had gone. The small cup before him now sat perfectly still, the surface smooth as glass. He could see the reflection of the moon shimmering inside it, one round light floating in quiet water. He thought of all the ways he had tried to control his life, his breath during meditation, his thoughts, his path, his reputation. He realized that control had always been his way of pushing against the flow of the universe. He had been trying to make the river stop, not knowing it was the river that carried him. For a long while, he simply watched the moon in the cup. He noticed how, when the wind touched the surface, the reflection trembled, yet the moon itself never changed. The disturbance was only in the water. When the water stilled again, the moon returned without effort. He began to understand. The next morning, the young monk rose early and went to the garden. Dew clung to the blades of grass, glistening in the dawn light. He saw the master tending the small vegetable patch, pulling weeds with the calm focus of someone who had forgotten time. The monk bowed again. "Master," he said, "I think I understand what you meant about the cup. But my mind still fills so easily. Every day, worries pour into it, duties, desires, fears. Even when I try to be empty, thoughts keep coming. How can I stop them?" The master did not look up. He continued pulling weeds, one by one, before answering. "You do not stop them," he said. "You stop calling them yours." The monk tilted his head. "Not mine?" The master sat back on his heels. "When the wind passes through the bamboo, do you say, 'That sound belongs to me'? Thoughts are like the wind. They pass through the mind. When you claim them as yours, you fill your cup again and again. When you let them pass, the cup stays open." The monk stood in silence. A small bird landed nearby, pecking gently at the soil. Its movements were simple, effortless, guided by something beyond planning. He watched it hop, pause, and lift into the air again. No hesitation, no control, just being. He looked back to the master, who was now quietly watering the plants. "Master," he said, "you never seem to hurry. You never seem to worry about doing things right. How do you live this way?" The master smiled faintly. "Because the garden grows by itself. My work is to show up, to touch the earth, to care. The rest belongs to the universe." Days passed, then weeks. The young monk continued his studies, but something within him had begun to soften. He no longer measured his progress by how many hours he meditated or how silent his thoughts became. Instead, he began to notice small things: the sound of rain against the roof, the warmth of the morning sun, the feeling of breath moving through his chest. He realized that peace was not a reward for effort. It was what remained when effort quieted. One evening, he sat by the small stream that ran past the monastery walls. The water moved gently over stones, catching bits of light from the setting sunday. He remembered how the master had poured tea until the cup overflowed, and he saw that his own life had been the same. Every plan, every expectation, every wish for things to go a certain way, they had been like more and more tea poured into a cup already full. He reached down, scooped a little water into his hand, and watched it slip through his fingers. He smiled. "I cannot hold it," he said softly to himself, "but it still touches me." The stream continued on, unbothered. It did not regret the water that had passed, nor cling to what had not yet come. It only moved because movement was its nature. That night, the young monk slept deeply for the first time in years. Months later, a heavy storm came to the mountains. The wind howled through the trees, rain lashed against the temple roofs, and the world seemed alive with wild energy. The young monk found himself pacing restlessly, worrying about the gardens, the old trees, the small bridge that crossed the stream. Finally, he went to find the master, who was sitting calmly by the window, watching the rain. The master gestured for him to sit. "Master," the monk said over the noise of the storm, "how can you stay so calm when everything outside is chaos? Don't you worry the garden will be destroyed?" The master turned to him, eyes soft with amusement. "The garden knows how to bow," he said. "It bends with the rain. It trusts the storm to teach it how to grow." The monk looked out the window. The bamboo outside swayed back and forth, almost to the ground, yet never broke. It moved with the wind, not against it, and when the storm passed, it would stand again. He realized that even in the storm, the universe was not out of control. It was only moving in a way that seemed wild to the human mind. What looked like chaos was simply another rhythm of harmony too vast to be planned. He breathed deeply, and for the first time, he stopped resisting the storm within himself. When morning came, the world was washed clean. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. The monk walked through the garden, expecting to find destruction, but instead he saw something beautiful. The rain had nourished the soil, the leaves were shining, and the air felt alive. The storm had not destroyed it, had refreshed. He found the master standing beneath the great tree near the temple gate. The master looked up at the glistening leaves. "You see," he said quietly, "even the sky knows when it is time to pour." The monk bowed his head. "And when it is time to stop?" The master smiled. "It stops by itself." The monk felt a deep peace wash over him. The lesson was not about tea or rain or even control. It was about trust, the kind that comes when you stop trying to decide how things should be, and instead open yourself to how they are. Seasons passed again. The young monk grew older, though his eyes became softer, not harder. He no longer asked the master how to control his life. Instead, he asked how to listen. He listened to the wind, to the silence between breaths, to the rhythm of his own heart. One afternoon, as he swept the temple courtyard, a traveler arrived, a weary man carrying a heavy pack. The monk greeted him and offered tea. As they sat together, the traveler sighed. "I have been walking for months," he said. "I am searching for a teacher who can show me how to find peace. My thoughts are heavy, my life feels out of control." The monk smiled and poured the traveler a cup of tea. He kept pouring, even as the tea began to spill. "Stop!" the traveler exclaimed. "It's overflowing." The monk set the pot down gently. "Yes," he said, "and so are you." The traveler stared at him, confused at first, then something within him softened. The monk's calmness was contagious. The traveler took a slow breath, then another. "Then how," he asked quietly, "do I empty my cup?" The monk looked out at the mountains beyond the temple walls. "You don't," he said softly. "You stop filling it." That evening, after the traveler had gone to rest, the monk walked alone through the quiet garden. The sky was deep blue, scattered with stars. He thought of his younger self, the restless monk who had come to the master, full of questions, full of control. He smiled at the memory. He looked at the small pond beside the path, perfectly still, reflecting the moon. He saw that his mind was now like that, not empty in the sense of nothingness, but open, spacious, able to reflect life as it was without distortion. He realized that emptiness was not a void, it was freedom. It was the space that allowed everything to move, to breathe, to be. In the quiet, he heard the voice of the master, as if echoing from that first night. "When you stop trying to control," it whispered, "the tea will find its own stillness." Years later, when the old master passed away, the young monk, now a teacher himself, poured a cup of tea before the master's seat. He let it overflow slightly, a small stream of warmth spilling onto the wooden tray. He bowed deeply and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to let go." That night, he sat alone in the meditation hall, listening to the wind outside. The same sound that once stirred his anxiety now soothed him. Each gust felt like the universe breathing, and he breathed along with it. He felt no need to control the world anymore. The stars did not need his permission to shine. The river did not need his guidance to flow. Life was happening perfectly without his interference. He closed his eyes and smiled. In his heart, he felt a vast space, quiet, still, and full of light. It was the same space he had once mistaken for emptiness. But now he understood. This emptiness was love. It was the universe itself, holding him gently in its infinite hands. And so, As the night deepened, the teacher, who had once been a frightened young monk, drifted into peaceful sleep. His last thought before sleep was a whisper to all who would one day come seeking control, seeking peace, seeking to understand: empty your cup. The universe cannot fill what you refuse to let go of. The candle flickered beside him, then went out. But in the quiet that followed, nothing was lost, only stillness remained. And the tea, somewhere in the dark, found its own stillness at last. The night before the great storm, the air was heavy and still. Even the crickets had gone quiet, as if the whole valley was holding its breath. High in the mountains stood a small temple, surrounded by a grove of bamboo. Inside, an old monk sat by candlelight, reading from a worn scroll. His young student, Rio, knelt nearby, quietly polishing the temple floor. But Rio's thoughts were restless, his eyes drawn to the window where dark clouds gathered over the mountains. "Master," he said softly, "the villagers say a terrible storm is coming. They say it will be stronger than any we've seen in years." The old monk lifted his gaze from the scroll. His eyes were calm, his voice quiet and clear. "Then," he said, "we shall listen to what the wind has to teach." Rio frowned. "But shouldn't we prepare? The roofs may break, the trees may fall. Shouldn't we protect the temple?" The monk smiled gently. "The bamboo does not run from the storm," he said. "It bends and remains." Rio bowed and said no more, but in his heart unease lingered. He closed the shutters, checked the roof beams, and brought in the lanterns. The master, meanwhile, sat unmoving, the candlelight soft on his face. That night, the storm came. It began as a whisper through the valleys, then grew into a roar. The wind howled like an angry spirit, shaking the mountain trees. Rain fell in heavy sheets, hammering the rooftops, rushing down the paths in silver streams. Inside the temple, Rio sat upright, every muscle tense. The walls trembled, the shutters banged, and the world outside seemed to split apart. But the master sat still, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. "Master," Rio whispered, "aren't you afraid?" The monk opened his eyes. "The wind is only passing through," he said. "It has no wish to stay." Rio tried to calm himself, but the storm raged on. He could hear trees breaking in the distance, the crash of wood against stone. And yet, beneath the chaos, there was something else, a strange rhythm. The wind did not only destroy, it sang. Through the storm's cry, he could almost hear a deeper voice, the breath of the earth, fierce but alive, wild yet beautiful. By dawn, the storm had passed. The morning was silent. Mist floated over the valley, and the ground glistened with water. Rio stepped outside and gasped. The great oak trees had splintered. Branches lay scattered across the fields. The villagers' roofs had collapsed under the rain, but the bamboo grove that surrounded the temple stood unharmed. Each stalk was tall and green, glistening in the soft morning light. "How can this be?" Rio said aloud. Everything else was destroyed. The master joined him, leaning on his walking stick. "Look closely," he said. Rio looked again. The bamboo bowed gently in the wind, graceful and alive. "The bamboo survived," he said softly, "even through the storm." The master nodded. "Because it bowed?" Rio frowned. "It bent because it was weak." The monk smiled. "No," he said. "It bent because it was wise." Later that day, the villagers came to the temple. Their faces were tired, their clothes torn from the wind. They told stories of broken homes and ruined crops. When they saw the bamboo still standing, they were amazed. "Master," one of them said, "how did your grove survive when our strongest trees were torn apart?" The monk led them to the grove. The bamboo shimmered under the sun, swaying gently as if bowing to greet them. "The bamboo does not fight the wind," he said. "It moves with it. When the wind blows, it yields. When it passes, it rises again." The villagers listened in silence. One man said, "But we are not bamboo. How can we bend when life breaks us?" The monk looked at him kindly. "By remembering what the bamboo knows," he said. "When life pushes, bend, do not break. Even pain can be a teacher when you listen without resistance." The villagers bowed. As they walked down the hill, some wept quietly, not from sorrow, but from understanding. In the weeks that followed, Rio helped rebuild the village. He noticed how people faced hardship differently. Some shouted at the sky, blaming fate. Others worked quietly, their hands steady, their spirits calm. Those who accepted what was lost seemed stronger, not weaker. They did not waste their strength on anger. They focused on what could be done now, in this moment. One evening, Rio returned to the temple and sat beside the master by the stream. The sun had dipped below the hills, and the water glowed gold in the fading light. "Master," Rio said, "I understand the bamboo now. It bends and survives. But how can I bend when fear fills my heart? How can I yield when I am so afraid to lose?" The old monk lifted a pebble and dropped it into the stream. Ripples spread outward, then slowly vanished. "When you cling to what must move," he said, "fear is born. But when you allow the water to flow, peace returns by itself." Rio watched the ripples fade into stillness. "Then to trust," he said, "is to flow." The monk nodded. "To trust life," he said softly, "is to let it move through you, even when you do not understand its path." Rio lowered his gaze to the stream, watching the reflection of the sky. He saw the clouds drifting, the trees bending in the wind, and he began to feel what the master meant. To resist was suffering, to yield was freedom. That night, lying on his mat, Rio thought about the storm. He thought of all the times he had tried to force peace, to control his thoughts, to make life follow his rules. Every time he had grown tense, hard, and fearful. He realized he had been like the oak, strong, proud, but unable to bend. Now he wanted to be like the bamboo, flexible, trusting, alive. He whispered to himself, "When the wind comes, I will bend." And as he closed his eyes, he felt the breeze from the open window brush his face. He smiled. Sleep came softly, like the wind itself. Seasons turned, and the valley healed. The fields grew green again, the roofs were repaired, and the laughter of children returned. Life, as always, continued. One afternoon, a boy from the village ran up the hill to the temple, holding a broken kite. "Master Rio," he said breathlessly, "the wind tore my kite apart. Can you fix it?" Rio smiled and knelt beside him. "The wind did not mean to break it," he said. "It was only being what it is." "But it ruined it," the boy cried. Rio pointed to the grove. "Do you see the bamboo?" The boy nodded. "They don't seem afraid of the wind," he said. "They aren't," Rio replied. "They know the wind will pass. When you fix your kite, make it lighter. Let it move with the wind, not against it. Then it will fly even higher." The boy thought about this, nodded slowly, and ran off smiling. The wind caught his hair as he went, and Rio heard the soft laughter of the bamboo behind him. Years passed. The master grew old, his hair white, his hands thin and trembling, but his eyes still shone with quiet joy. One evening, as the sky turned red over the mountains, he called Rio to his side. "Do you remember," he asked, "the night of the great storm?" Rio smiled. "I remember how afraid I was, and how calm you were, even as the roof shook." The old monk laughed softly. "The storm taught us both that night. Tell me, Rio, what did you learn?" Rio looked out at the bamboo swaying in the wind. "I learned that peace is not found in stillness alone," he said. "It is found in trust. It is knowing that the wind will pass, and that bending is not weakness, but wisdom." The old man nodded slowly. And what of fear? Fear, Rio said, is forgetting that the wind will pass. The master smiled. Then you have learned to bend. As the last light of day faded, the bamboo glowed gold in the distance. A soft wind moved through the grove, and the stalks bowed together, whispering in the dusk. The master closed his eyes. The body, he said, is like the bamboo. One day it too must bend to the wind and fall. But what moves through it, that never breaks. Rio's eyes filled with tears. Master, the monk's hand rested lightly on his arm. Do not grieve the falling, he said. The wind carries everything home. That night, the old master passed away in his sleep. Outside, the wind sighed softly through the valley. In the days that followed, Rio tended the temple alone. The villagers came with offerings, their faces full of quiet sorrow. When they asked him what wisdom the old monk had left behind, he led them to the bamboo grove. The master said the bamboo survives because it bends, Rio told them. So too must we learn to bend when life tests us. To be soft is not weakness, it is trust. The villagers bowed their heads. Some smiled through their tears, for they understood. Years passed again. The bamboo grew taller, thicker, greener. New shoots rose where old ones had fallen. Rio, now old himself, walked among them each morning. The sound of the wind through the grove was his prayer, his teacher, his comfort. One day, after a light rain, he noticed a bamboo stalk split near its base. From the wound, a new shoot was growing. He touched it gently and smiled. Even broken bamboo grows again, he whispered. The storm never wins. That evening, he sat beneath the grove as the sun went down. The air was cool, the sky a wash of silver and gold. He closed his eyes and listened to the wind moving through the leaves. It sounded like breathing. It sounded like life itself. He whispered, because it bent. His breath slowed, his body grew still, and peace covered him like the falling dusk. When the villagers found him the next morning, he was sitting beneath the bamboo, smiling. The wind that day was softer than ever, as if the valley itself bowed in gratitude. And from that day on, whenever storms came, the villagers would gather in the grove and tell their children, "Look at the bamboo! It survives because it bends." And so, the lesson lived on, whispered through generations, carried by the wind, sung by the bamboo. True strength is not found in standing rigid, but in the grace of yielding. Peace is not the absence of wind, but harmony with it. To trust the universe is to let the wind move through you, to bend, to rise, and to remain unbroken. And so the bamboo swayed on, gentle, wise, eternal. The river had always been the heart of the valley. It wound through fields and forests like a living thread of silver, changing with every season. In the summer, it sparkled softly beneath the sunday. In the spring, it rushed wild and high with melted snow from the mountains. The villagers who lived nearby said the river had moods like a person, gentle one day, fierce the next. To the old monks at the nearby temple, the river was more than water. It was a teacher. One evening, after several days of rain, a monk named Haru stood by the riverbank, watching the current swell and rise. He was on his way to a neighboring temple across the valley, where he had been invited to teach, but the bridge he always used had been washed away by the storm. The water was too deep and fast to cross safely. The sun had already set, and darkness was creeping through the trees. Haru stood still, listening to the roar of the river. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Behind him, fireflies blinked softly in the reeds. He looked at the swirling water and whispered, "Not tonight." He found a dry patch of ground under a tree, sat down, and folded his robe around him. The night would be long, but he did not complain. He knew the river had its own rhythm, and no man could rush its flow. As the hours passed, Haru listened to the sounds of the night, the rush of water, the croak of frogs, the distant call of an owl. He thought of how easily people grew impatient, how they tried to push life to move faster than it was meant to. He smiled quietly to himself. "The river flows when it wishes," he murmured, "and I will cross when it allows." At dawn, the rain clouds drifted away. The first light touched the surface of the river, turning it gold. The water had fallen just enough for the stones beneath to show through. Haru rose, tightened his sandals, and began to wade carefully across. The current tugged gently at his robe, but his steps were steady. When he reached the other side, he looked back and bowed. "Thank you, old river," he said softly. "You have taught me again." He walked on toward the neighboring temple, his heart quiet and his mind light. He understood now that patience was not just about waiting. It was about trusting the moment, trusting that everything unfolds in its own time. Several days later, Haru returned to his own temple. The abbot, an elderly monk with kind eyes, was sweeping the courtyard. "You were delayed," the abbot said. "The bridge was gone," Haru replied. "I had to wait for the river to lower." The abbot nodded slowly. "And what did the river teach you?" Haru smiled. "That patience is not waiting for life to obey me. It is trusting that life already knows when to move." The abbot's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Ah," he said, "you have listened well." He set down his broom and looked toward the mountains. "When I was a young monk," he said, "I used to think patience was standing still until something happened. I would pray for signs, for answers, for things to change. But life is not a door that opens when you knock harder. It opens when it's ready." Haru bowed his head. "And what did you do while you waited?" The abbot smiled faintly. "I learned to sweep." They both laughed softly. That night, as the moon rose above the temple roof, Haru sat outside his small cell, watching the river in the distance. He could hear its gentle murmur carried on the wind. He thought about how much of his life had been spent in trying to learn faster, to achieve enlightenment, to control outcomes. He realized that all along, life had been moving at the right speed. It was he who had been rushing ahead of it. In the stillness of the night, he remembered a time years ago when he had been impatient with his own teacher. He had been a young monk then, eager to master meditation. He would sit for hours, waiting for calm to arrive, but his thoughts would whirl like leaves in the wind. One day, he had gone to his master in frustration. "My mind refuses to be still," he said. "No matter how long I sit, it will not obey me." His teacher had smiled and pointed toward the mountains. "You see the clouds?" he asked. "Yes," Haru had replied. "Do they rush to clear the sky because you wish for sun?" Haru had shaken his head. "Then why do you rush your mind? Clouds drift away when the wind is ready. The mind clears when the heart is ready. Not before." Haru smiled now, remembering. He could almost hear his teacher's voice in the sound of the river. The lesson had taken years to sink in. Patience was not an act of control, it was an act of faith. A few weeks later, word came from the village that the river was flooding again. Haru and several monks went down to help the farmers move their animals to higher ground. The rain poured for days without rest. The river rose until it lapped at the edge of the road. Some villagers grew desperate. "We must build a new bridge before the water rises higher," one man shouted. Haru shook his head. "Not now," he said. "The river is strong tonight. We will wait." Another man glared at him. "Wait. If we wait, we'll lose everything." Haru said nothing. He simply watched the current swirl, brown and wild, carrying branches and leaves downstream. "You cannot build a bridge on moving water," he said quietly. "Let it rest first. When the river calms, it will show you where to step." The man muttered angrily and stormed off. But 2 days later, when the rain finally stopped, the waters began to drop. The villagers gathered again. This time, they could see the rocks at the bottom, and the land on both sides of the river was firm again. Together, they built a new bridge stronger than before. When it was finished, the same man came to Haru. "You were right," he said. "If we had tried before, the river would have taken the bridge away." Haru smiled. "The river builds and destroys," he said. "It knows when each must happen. All we can do is listen." That evening, Haru sat by the water's edge. The sunset reflected like fire across the ripples. He picked up a smooth stone and turned it in his hand. The river had made it round and soft over many years, shaping it not through force but through time. He thought about how much of life was like that stone. The universe did not rush to finish its work. It shaped everything in quiet, steady rhythm, seasons, rivers, hearts. He realized that patience was not about inaction, it was about harmony, with timing. He whispered to the river, "You do not hurry, yet everything you touch becomes smooth." Seasons passed, and the bridge became a part of the villagers' daily life. Children crossed it on their way to school, farmers carried their goods over it to the markets, and travelers stopped by to rest in its shade. The monks would often walk down to the river to bathe or collect water for tea. One morning, a young novice came running to Haru. "Master," he said breathlessly, "there is a traveler who wants to see you. He says he needs your help to cross the river." Haru followed him down to the bank. There, a man stood with his cart, pacing anxiously. The river was calm, but the man kept staring at it as though it might suddenly rise again. "Master," the man said quickly, "I have been waiting since dawn for the ferry. It is late. I must get to the next village before noon, or I will lose my business deal. Can't you show me a faster way across?" Haru studied him quietly. "The ferry will come when it comes," he said. The man groaned. "I can't wait. Every minute I lose costs me money." Haru pointed to the water. "Do you see the current?" The man nodded impatiently. "Try to walk against it," Haru said. The man hesitated, confused. "It's too strong." "Exactly," said Haru. "When you rush before the current allows, you lose your balance. When you wait for its gentleness, it carries you where you need to go." The man frowned but said nothing. Minutes passed. Then, in the distance, the ferry appeared, gliding smoothly across the river. The man sighed with relief and hurried aboard. As he left, Haru called out, "The river flows when it wishes, my friend, and you cross when it allows." The man did not reply, but later that evening, as the ferry returned, the boatman told Haru that the traveler had spoken of those words all day. He said they followed him like an echo. The boatman chuckled. "Maybe they'll slow him down a little." Haru smiled. "If they help him breathe, that is enough." Years went by. Haru grew older. His beard turned silver, and his steps slowed. But he still visited the river every morning at sunrise. Sometimes he would bring a bowl of tea, sit by the edge, and simply watch the light move across the surface. One morning, a young monk joined him. "Master," he said, "I have been waiting for enlightenment. I meditate every day, I study the scriptures, I pray, but still I feel no peace. Why does it not come?" Haru took a sip of tea before answering. "Do you see the river?" "Yes," said the monk. "When it rains, it floods. When it dries, it slows. Does the river ask when peace will come, or does it simply flow?" The young monk looked down, unsure. "But how will I know when it's my time?" Haru smiled. "When you stop asking." They sat together in silence, watching a leaf drift by. Haru added softly, "Peace does not arrive by command. It comes like the tide when the moon calls it. Patience is trusting that your moment will come when it should." The young monk bowed deeply, his heart touched by the quiet truth. Many years later, the villagers built a new stone bridge over the river, stronger and higher than any before. They named it after Haru, who had passed away peacefully that spring. Every traveler who crossed it saw a small carving on the stone pillar beside the path. It read, The river flows when it wishes. You cross when it allows. Over time, people began to repeat those words in moments of struggle. Farmers would whisper them when the rains were late. Mothers would murmur them when their children grew restless. Old men would speak them as they waited for healing. The words became a kind of prayer not for control, but for trust. And so, the lesson lived on. Patience, they learned, is not sitting still while life unfolds. It is breathing with it. It is knowing that the universe has its rhythm, that every delay, every pause, every silence is part of a larger song. The river never stops moving, yet it never hurries. The same current that seems to hold us back is often the one carrying us forward. When the moon rose over the valley, the water shimmered like glass. The wind touched the surface lightly, and the river whispered its timeless truth, one that Haru had once heard in the darkness long ago. The river flows when it wishes, and you, too, must learn to move with its time. For to trust the universe is to trust its timing. To live with peace is to know that what is meant for you will arrive not a moment too soon, not a moment too late. The current always carries those who are still enough to float. And those who listen, truly listen, never need to hurry again. A long time ago, in a quiet valley surrounded by soft green mountains, there lived a humble farmer named Liang. His house was small, his clothes were simple, and his heart was calm. Each morning, he rose before the sun, fed his animals, and tended to his crops with gentle care. He did not chase riches or power. He only wished to live in peace with the rhythm of the earth. One morning, Liang went to his stable and found that his horse, the only one he owned, was gone. The wooden gate had broken during the night, and the animal had run off into the hills. Soon his neighbors heard the news and came to see him. "Oh, Liang," one of them said, shaking his head. "Such terrible luck. How will you plow your fields now? How will you bring your crops to market? Without your horse, your work will be twice as hard." Liang looked toward the mountains, where the mist still hung low in the morning air. "Perhaps," he said softly. "Perhaps not." The neighbors frowned. "Surely this is bad luck," another said. Liang smiled faintly. "Who can say what is good or bad?" he replied, and then quietly returned to his work. Days passed. Liang continued to till the soil by hand. When the sun was hot, he wiped the sweat from his brow. When the nights were cold, he wrapped himself in a thin blanket and rested. He did not curse his fortune or wish that life would change. He worked, he ate, and he slept just as he always had. Then, one evening, as he mended a broken fence, Liang heard the sound of hooves in the distance. When he looked up, he saw his horse running home from the hills. But the horse was not alone. Behind it came several wild horses, strong, beautiful creatures with manes that shimmered in the fading light. Liang opened the gate, and the horses entered his yard without fear. His horse, it seemed, had returned with friends. When the neighbors heard, they came running. "Liang," they cried, "what wonderful luck! Your horse has returned, and now you have many more. Surely the heavens favor you." Liang looked at them calmly. "Perhaps," he said. "Perhaps not." The neighbors blinked. "You mean you do not think this is good fortune?" Liang smiled gently. "Who can say what is good or bad?" he said again, and went inside to prepare their evening meal. The next morning, Liang's son, Wei, decided to train the new horses. He was young, strong, and eager to prove himself. "Father," he said, "these horses could change our lives. We could sell them, buy better tools, and repair our house." Liang nodded. "Be kind to them," he said. "They belong to the wind. Patience tames what force cannot." Wei smiled. "I'll be careful," he said, and began his work. At first, the horses resisted. They were wild and proud, unaccustomed to ropes or riders. Wei worked all morning, speaking softly and moving slowly, but one horse, tall, dark, and fierce, refused to calm down. In his eagerness, Wei pushed too hard. The horse reared suddenly, kicking out with its powerful legs. Wei was thrown to the ground, and a sharp crack filled the air. He screamed in pain. His leg was broken. The neighbors came rushing when they heard the cries. "Liang," they said sadly, "what terrible luck. Your only son is injured. He cannot work for months. How will you manage now?" Liang looked at his son, who lay pale and trembling, and said quietly, "Perhaps." The neighbors were confused. "How can you say that? This is surely bad fortune." Liang smiled faintly. "Who can say what is good or bad?" he said softly, and tended to his son's wound. The days that followed were difficult. Liang worked alone in the fields. His back ached and his hands grew blistered. Yet each evening he brought his son tea and told him stories by the fire. One night, Wei looked at his father with regret. "If only I had listened to you," he said. "If I had been patient, this wouldn't have happened." Liang poured him another cup of tea. "Do not wish for the past to change," he said gently. "We cannot see where the path leads until we walk it. Every step, even the painful ones, brings us somewhere new." Wei sighed. "But this must be bad luck, father. How can it be anything else?" Liang smiled. "We will see," he said. "The story isn't finished yet." A few weeks later, soldiers rode into the valley. A war had begun, and the emperor had ordered every able young man to join the army. Families gathered in the village square, trembling as their sons were taken away. Mothers wept, and fathers stood silent, unable to speak. When the soldiers reached Liang's house, they saw Wei sitting near the doorway, his leg still bound in cloth. One of the officers looked at him and shook his head. "He is no use to the army," he said. "Leave him." And so the soldiers rode away. The neighbors came again that evening. "Liang," they said, "you are blessed. Our sons have gone to war, but yours is spared. What great luck." Liang bowed slightly. "Perhaps," he said softly. "Perhaps not," the neighbors groaned. "Why must you always say that?" Liang looked at them kindly. "Because I have lived long enough to see fortune change its face again and again. The seed that seems dead in winter becomes the wheat of summer. The storm that breaks the branches also feeds the soil. I cannot say which moment is good or bad, because the story keeps unfolding." The neighbors left shaking their heads, but Liang returned to his quiet work, his heart still calm. Months passed. The war raged on. Letters came from the front lines, each one carrying news of loss. Many of the young men from the village would never return. Their families mourned beside their empty homes. One evening, Wei sat beside his father as the sun dipped behind the mountains. "Father," he said softly, "if my leg hadn't broken, I would have gone to war. I might not be here now." Liang nodded. "Yes, then my accident was good luck," Wei said. Liang smiled gently. "Was it?" he asked. "Or was it simply life unfolding?" Wei frowned. "But if my injury saved my life, isn't that good?" Liang looked at the horizon. "The world is not divided into good and bad, my son. It is only whole. When you stop trying to name every wave, you begin to see the sea." Wei was silent for a long time. The wind moved softly through the trees, and he began to understand. Years passed. The war ended, and peace returned to the valley. Some families rebuilt their homes, others never recovered. The seasons came and went, and Liang grew old. His hair turned white, his steps slow, but his eyes remained clear and calm. One day, a traveler came to the village. He had heard stories of the farmer who never judged his fortune, and he came to see for himself. When he found Liang tending his field, he bowed deeply. "Old man," he said, "I have traveled far to meet you. Is it true that you never call anything good or bad?" Liang smiled. "It is true that I have stopped trying." The traveler frowned. "But without judging, how do you make choices?" Liang pointed to the soil beneath his feet. "I plant the seed," he said, Whether it grows or not, that is not for me to decide. My work is to plant." The traveler looked confused. "Then you trust in luck?" Liang shook his head. "No, I trust the unfolding. Life knows how to become what it must. I only need to walk with it, not against it." The traveler bowed again, still puzzled but deeply moved. "Your heart must be very peaceful," Liang smiled. "Peace comes when we stop arguing with what is." Years went by. Wei grew into a wise man, much like his father. Though his leg never fully healed, he walked with grace and worked with quiet strength. When Liang became too old to farm, Wei cared for him as lovingly as Liang had once cared for him. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of sunset, Liang sat outside his home, watching the river that wound through the valley. The sound of flowing water filled the air. "Wei," he said softly, "do you hear the river?" "Yes, father," Wei said. Liang smiled. "It flows without asking where it is going. It does not call its bends mistakes or its floods curses. It only moves, and in moving, it becomes the river." Wei looked at him, tears filling his eyes. "Is that how you have lived, father? Like the river?" Liang nodded. "I have tried, and now the river carries me too." That night, Liang passed away peacefully in his sleep. The wind outside whispered through the grass, and the river flowed on. After his father's death, Wei took care of the farm. The villagers often came to ask his advice, just as they once had with Liang. When someone complained of misfortune, Wei would smile gently and say, "Perhaps." When someone celebrated their good fortune, he would smile again and say, "Perhaps not." At first, people laughed, thinking he was being mysterious. But over time, they began to understand. They saw how their own joys and sorrows changed shape again and again, how what once seemed like ruin became blessing, and how every ending gave birth to something new. And so, in the valley, the story of Liang lived on. Parents told their children the tale of the farmer whose horse ran away, whose son was injured, and who never judged what happened to him. They said that when storms came or fortune shifted, they could still hear his voice in the wind, saying softly, "Who can say what is good or bad? Trust the unfolding." The lesson was simple, yet endless in its depth. Life cannot be forced to fit our labels. What we call bad may be the seed of something good. What we call good may hold unseen lessons. Everything changes, and every change belongs to the greater whole. When we stop fighting life's movement, we begin to live in peace with it. Trusting the unfolding means knowing that every loss, every joy, every silence is part of the same mysterious design. And like the river that flows without needing to understand its journey, we too can learn to live without fear of what comes next, trusting, always trusting, the gentle wisdom of the universe. In a quiet monastery nestled in the mountains, there lived a young monk named Ren. He was kind, disciplined, and devoted to his practice, but within him lived a quiet storm. Every day he feared that he was not good enough, not wise enough, not calm enough, not enlightened enough. Though he followed every rule, rose before dawn, and meditated for hours, a shadow of self-doubt followed him everywhere he went. The master of the monastery, an old monk named Daejin, had watched Ren grow from a child into a diligent student. He admired his effort, but he also saw the tightness in the boy's heart. One evening, as the sun was setting and the courtyard filled with golden light, the master called Ren to walk with him. They walked in silence through the bamboo grove. The wind moved gently through the tall stalks, making a sound like soft music. After a while, Daejin stopped and pointed to the ground. Their shadows stretched long before them in the fading Sunday. "Ren," he said quietly, "why do you walk as if you are carrying a mountain on your back?" Ren bowed his head. "Master, I am trying to be a good monk. I wish to serve the teachings faithfully, but I fear I am failing. My thoughts wander in meditation, my heart is restless, and I fear that the path is leaving me behind." The master smiled slightly. "Tell me," he said, "can your shadow fail the sun?" Ren looked up, confused. "I don't understand." The master said nothing more. He began to walk again, his shadow moving beside him across the path. Ren followed in silence, his own shadow keeping pace. No matter how he turned, it remained there, inseparable from him, always in the same light. That night, Ren lay awake in his small cell, turning the master's question over and over in his mind. "Can your shadow fail the sun?" He did not know the answer. All he knew was the feeling of trying endlessly to meditate better, to think less, to be pure. He thought of the other monks, who seemed so serene, and wondered why peace came to them, but not to him. He fell asleep with a heavy heart. The next morning, the master called all the monks to gather in the courtyard for meditation. The air was cool, and mist clung to the grass. As they sat, the first light of dawn began to rise over the mountains. The master spoke softly. "When you sit in silence," he said, "the mind will try to measure your progress. It will whisper, 'You are failing.' It will say, 'You are not good enough.' But who is it that measures? Who is it that fails? The mind itself cannot see beyond its own shadow." Ren listened, his eyes closed, his breath unsteady. The words touched something deep within him. He wanted to ask the master what they meant, but the master had already fallen silent. The sound of wind through the bamboo replaced his voice. As the hours passed, the monks returned to their daily duties. Ren was assigned to sweep the temple steps. He moved his broom slowly, lost in thought. As the morning sun rose higher, his shadow stretched long across the stone steps. No matter how much he moved, it followed exactly, silent and faithful. Suddenly, he remembered the master's words again. He stopped sweeping and stared at his shadow. It moved when he moved, rested when he rested, and disappeared only when he stepped fully into the shade. It never disobeyed the sun, it only reflected how he stood in its light. "Can your shadow fail the sun?" he whispered to himself again. No, it cannot. In that moment, something shifted in his heart. He realized that he had spent years fearing that he was separate from truth, that he could lose the light of wisdom if he stumbled. But just as his shadow could not fail the sun, perhaps he, too, could not fall outside the universe's grace. He looked up at the sky. The sun was brilliant and steady, shining on every monk, every leaf, every drop of dew. It did not judge who deserved its warmth. It gave light to all without hesitation. Maybe enlightenment is not something I must reach, he thought. Maybe it is already shining on me. That evening, Ren went to the master's quarters. The air smelled of tea and sandalwood. Dajin was seated by the window, watching the sunset. Ren bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "I think I understand what you meant. The shadow cannot fail the sun because it belongs to it. I too belong to something greater. But if that is true, why do I still feel lost at times?" The master turned to him, eyes gentle. "When a cloud covers the sun," he said, "does the sun disappear?" Ren shook his head. "No, master, the sun remains." "Then why do you believe that when your mind is cloudy, the light has left you?" Ren lowered his eyes. The master continued, "The mind is like the weather. It changes storms, winds, sunlight, rain, but the vast sky above it remains untouched. When you identify with the clouds, you believe you are lost. When you remember the sky, you know you were never apart from the light." Ren listened in silence. The words sank deep. "Your shadow," the master said softly, "is proof that you are walking in light. If you were truly lost, there would be no shadow to see. Failure cannot exist where the light is constant. It only exists in your forgetting of it." Ren bowed again, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, master," he whispered. From that day forward, Ren's practice began to change. He still meditated, swept, and prayed, but something within him softened. When his thoughts wandered, he no longer scolded himself. He smiled instead, noticing how quickly the mind tried to measure what could not be measured. He began to walk through the temple gardens each morning before sunrise. He would watch the darkness slowly dissolve as the light returned. Each dawn became a quiet sermon, a reminder that no matter how deep the night, the sun always returned. Sometimes, when he passed the reflecting pool, he would see his face mirrored in the still water. Behind it, his shadow shimmered faintly. He began to see both as friends, one made of light, the other shaped by it. Together, they reminded him that he was never alone. The other monks noticed a change in him. His movements became lighter, his laughter easier. He no longer seemed to struggle with himself. One morning, a younger monk approached him and said, "Brother Ren, how did you find peace? You always seem so at ease now." Ren smiled. "I stopped trying to separate myself from the light," he said. "I realized I was never apart from it to begin with." The younger monk frowned. "But what if I lose faith? What if I fail in my practice?" Ren looked at the boy kindly. "Step into the sunlight," he said. The monk obeyed. "Now look at your shadow." The boy looked down. It stretched before him on the ground. "Can your shadow fail the sun?" Ren asked. The boy blinked. "No, I suppose not." "Then remember that," Ren said gently. "Even when you feel far from peace, the light is still there. You cannot fall out of its reach." Seasons passed. The monastery bloomed in spring and slept under snow in winter. Ren grew older, and his wisdom deepened, though his words became fewer. He spoke only when needed, and when he did, his voice carried the stillness of someone who had seen the world without dividing it into success and failure. One summer morning, he sat beneath a great tree at the edge of the monastery grounds. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. He watched them shift as the wind moved through the branches. A young novice came running toward him, tears streaming down his face. "Master Ren," he cried, "I have failed. I fell asleep during meditation. I broke my vow of discipline." Ren looked up at him calmly. "Come," he said, patting the ground beside him. "Sit." The boy sat, trembling. "I try so hard," he said, "but my body is weak and my mind keeps drifting. I fear I will never be good enough to be a monk." Ren pointed to the ground. "Do you see the sunlight?" The boy nodded. "And the shadows of the leaves?" "Yes," Ren smiled. "The shadows dance because the branches move, not because the sun has changed. Your mistakes are movements of the branches. The light remains as it is." The boy wiped his tears. "So, I have not failed." Ren shook his head. "You cannot fail what you already are. You are the light, pretending to be the leaf." The boy stared at him, unsure whether to cry again or laugh. Ren simply closed his eyes and listened to the wind. Years passed, and Ren himself became the abbot of the monastery. Disciples came from faraway lands to study under him. But no matter how many questions they brought, his teaching remained simple. Once, a scholar came to visit, proud of his knowledge. He asked Ren, "Master, what is enlightenment?" Ren picked up a cup of tea and said, "This cup holds water. When I drink, the water disappears, but the cup remains. Enlightenment is knowing you are the cup, not the water." The scholar frowned. "Then what is failure?" Ren smiled. "A shadow, reminding the cup that the sun still shines." One winter morning, Ren stood at the top of the monastery steps, watching the sunrise. Snow covered the earth like a blanket, and the air was so clear that the light seemed to hum. He looked down and saw his shadow stretching long and dark across the white ground. He smiled. It followed him still, as it always had. "Old friend," he whispered, "you and I have walked a long way together." A young monk nearby overheard him and asked, "Master, to whom do you speak?" Ren laughed softly. "To my shadow." It reminds me that the universe never abandons what walks in its light." He turned to the monk. "Remember this, you and the light are not two things. Even when clouds hide the sun, its warmth still fills the world. Even when doubt hides your heart, truth still holds you." The monk bowed deeply, and Ren continued down the steps, his shadow gliding alongside him like a silent companion. When Ren grew old, his hair white and his steps slow, he spent most of his days sitting by the temple garden, watching the sunlight shift through the trees. The monks would often find him smiling quietly to himself, as if sharing a secret with the wind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Ren whispered, "How kind the light is, it follows me even into old age." His breath grew softer, and his eyes began to close. The monks gathered around him. One of them said, "Master, where will you go when the light fades?" Ren smiled faintly. "Where does the shadow go when night falls?" he said. "It returns to its source." Those were his last words. At dawn the next morning, the monks held a small ceremony in the courtyard. The sun rose over the valley, and their shadows stretched long across the snow. One young monk, the same boy who had once wept over his mistakes, looked at his shadow and remembered Ren's words. "The universe never abandons what walks in its light." He smiled through his tears. "Thank you, Master," he whispered. As the years passed, the story of Ren spread far beyond the mountains. Travelers spoke of the monk who taught that failure was only a misunderstanding of light. They said that anyone who remembered his words could find peace even in the darkest times. And so, the lesson lived on, simple, eternal, shining quietly like sunlight on stone. You cannot fail the light that made you. You only forget that it never leaves. Wherever you walk, your shadow will remind you the universe walks beside you, always patient and bright. High above the earth, where the sky meets silence, a single raindrop began to form. It was born from the cool breath of clouds, a shimmering bead of light suspended in endless blue. At first, it felt weightless and free. The wind cradled it, the clouds surrounded it, and it believed this moment of floating would last forever. But as the clouds darkened and the air grew heavy, the drop began to fall. It did not understand what was happening. The world it had known, the soft white embrace of the clouds, was fading above it. All around, countless other drops were falling too, yet it felt utterly alone. "Where am I going?" it whispered into the rushing air. "Why am I leaving everything I knew?" No one answered. The sky was vast, the wind fast, and the world below an unknown depth. The drop trembled as it fell through layers of air, feeling itself pulled towards something unseen. For the first time, it knew fear. As it fell, it passed birds darting through the rain, leaves swaying beneath it, and flashes of light in the storm. The drop noticed how all things seemed to move in their own way, none resisted. The trees bowed, the wind flowed, the other drops fell quietly beside it. But it could not find comfort. "I don't want to fall," it cried. "I don't want to disappear." The wind whispered around it, but said nothing. The earth came closer and closer, and still the drop clung to its shape, trying to remain separate, terrified that when it touched the ground or whatever waited below it would be gone forever. And then, through the grayness of the storm, it saw something vast, a great stretch of shimmering silver that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. The ocean. The drop's fear deepened. The ocean was so wide, so endless. "If I fall into that," it thought, "I will be lost. I will no longer be me." It tried to slow itself, but the air carried it forward. The sea grew nearer until the waves filled its vision. The sound was like a heartbeat, steady, deep, eternal. "No," the drop whispered. "I don't want to disappear." But it was too late. With a final breath, it touched the ocean's surface. There was no crash, no struggle, only stillness. The drop merged into the sea, its edges dissolving, its boundaries vanishing into the vastness. For a moment, there was nothing. No I, no me, only quiet. Then, within that stillness, a new awareness arose, soft, endless, bright. The drop realized it was not gone. It had not disappeared. It had become everything. The sea spoke through the waves, though no words were needed. "Welcome home," it said. The drop, now part of the ocean, laughed with joy. "I was never lost," it whispered. "I was never separate. I only forgot." Far away on the shore, an old monk stood beneath the falling rain, watching the sea. The rain soaked his robe, but he made no move to cover himself. A young novice stood beside him, shivering under a small straw hat. "Master," the boy said, "why do you stand here in the storm? You'll catch cold." The monk smiled. "Do you hear the rain?" "Yes," said the boy. "It's everywhere." The monk nodded. "Each drop believes it is falling alone, but when it touches the sea, it remembers it was never apart from it. So too are we, my son." The boy frowned, not fully understanding. "But master, we are not rain. We are people. We can think and feel and make choices." The monk turned to him. "Yes, and it is because of that very thinking that we forget our belonging. The raindrop never questions its fall. It trusts the wind, the sky, and the ocean waiting below. But the human heart clings to its own small shape, afraid that letting go means losing itself." The boy was silent for a moment. The sound of the rain filled the space between them. "Then what happens when we let go?" he asked. The monk smiled again. "We remember. We laugh, as the raindrop does when it meets the sea." Later that night, the young monk sat awake, listening to the sound of the rain on the roof. His teacher's words echoed in his mind. He tried to imagine what it meant to belong to the whole, to trust so deeply that fear could not reach him. He thought of how he often worried about the future, about whether he would ever be wise, whether he would ever live up to the master's example. His mind was always busy, comparing, measuring, fearing. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I am like the raindrop, always afraid to fall." He stood, opened the door of his small room, and stepped into the night. The rain was gentle now, each drop cool against his skin. He looked toward the sea in the distance, barely visible in the moonlight. The air smelled of salt and earth. "Master," he said softly, though the monk was not there to hear, "how do I trust the fall?" The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere far away, thunder murmured like an old song. The boy closed his eyes. He breathed in deeply, and for the first time, he did not wish to hold on to anything, not his worries, not his doubts, not even his sense of control. He let the rain soak through his robe, let the wind move him, let the moment be exactly as it was. When he opened his eyes again, something in him had shifted. The fear had not vanished completely, but it no longer ruled him. There was a quietness, a kind of knowing that did not need words. He smiled faintly. "Maybe this is what the raindrop feels," he thought. Days passed, and the rain gave way to sunlight. The hills turned green again, and the air grew warm. The young monk worked beside his teacher in the garden, pulling weeds and watering the vegetables. "Master," he said one morning, "I think I understand the story of the raindrop now, but sometimes, when I am afraid, I forget again. I feel small. I feel separate." The old monk nodded. "It is easy to forget. That is why we practice, not to become something more, but to remember what we already are." He pointed to a small pond beside the garden. "Look there," he said. The boy leaned over the water. It was perfectly still, reflecting the blue of the sky. "Do you see the clouds?" asked the master. "Yes. And when the wind blows, what happens?" "They disappear," the boy said. The master smiled. "The clouds do not vanish. They become the wind, the rain, the river, and the sea. Every form changes, but the essence remains. You too are like that. Fear comes when you think you are only the cloud. Peace comes when you remember you are also the sky. The boy stared at the water, watching his reflection tremble with the breeze. So even when I feel small, he said quietly, I am still part of the whole. The master nodded. Always. That evening, after the day's work was done, the monks gathered in the hall for meditation. The room was dimly lit, the air filled with the soft scent of incense. As the young monk closed his eyes, he imagined once again the raindrop falling, not with fear, but with trust. He imagined himself falling too, not into darkness, but into light, into belonging, into something vast and kind. In the quiet, he felt the pulse of his own heart, the rhythm of his breath, the faint sound of waves in the distance. Everything seemed connected, the wind, the sea, his body, his thoughts, his teacher, even the stars above the monastery roof. And then, for a brief moment, he felt no difference between them. He was the breath, the sea, the sky. The small I that had feared so much seemed to dissolve like salt in water. When the gong rang to end the meditation, he opened his eyes slowly. The world felt new, clear, alive, whole. Years passed. The young monk grew older and wiser. The master who had taught him eventually passed away, and the young monk, now no longer young, became the teacher to others. One afternoon, a student came to him with tears in her eyes. "Master," she said, "I am afraid. I try to be kind. I try to meditate, but my heart is restless. I worry about my family, my future, the world. I feel like I am falling apart." The monk listened patiently, then led her to the temple garden. Together, they stood by the pond where he had once learned his master's lesson. "Look into the water," he said. "Do you see the ripples?" "Yes." "Can you stop them from moving?" She shook her head. "No." "Do you need to?" She hesitated. "I suppose not." He smiled. "The water is still water, whether it ripples or not, and you are still whole, whether your mind is calm or troubled. You belong to something much larger than your fears." He pointed to the sky. "Every raindrop that has ever fallen finds its way back to the sea. No matter how far it travels, it never stops being water. You, too, can trust that life will carry you home." The young woman wept softly, not from sadness but from the relief of remembering something she had always known. Seasons turned. The monk grew very old. His hair turned white, his steps slow, but his spirit remained clear. He spent most of his days sitting near the sea, listening to the waves. One morning, a storm began to form over the horizon. The wind grew strong, and rain began to fall, thousands upon thousands of drops tumbling from the sky. The monk smiled and lifted his face to the rain. "Welcome home," he whispered. He felt the cool drops on his skin, each one alive, each one shining. He imagined their journey, their fear, their fall, their merging with the ocean below. And he laughed softly, just as the raindrop had laughed when it realized it was never lost. When the storm passed, the sky cleared to a deep, endless blue. The monk sat quietly, watching the light dance on the waves. A young novice approached him and said, "Master, I have a question. What happens to us when we die?" The monk looked at the sea and smiled. "Do you see the rain?" The novice nodded. "It falls, it flows, it becomes the ocean. It never truly dies, it only changes its form. When we leave this body, we return to what we have always been. We laugh, and we remember." The novice frowned. "Remember what?" "That we were never separate," the old monk said. The boy was silent, watching the waves. The wind moved gently across the water, carrying the scent of salt and sunlight. The monk closed his eyes. His breath was slow, his body still, but his spirit felt vast as the sea. He whispered, "Trust the fall, trust the belonging." When the monk passed away that night, the sea was calm and bright beneath the moon. The monks of the temple gathered on the shore to honor him. The wind carried the sound of the waves like a chant, soft and endless. One of the monks, the youngest, looked out at the water and thought he saw a single drop fall from the sky, shining like a pearl before it vanished into the sea. He smiled. He was never gone, he said quietly. He only returned. And as the waves rose and fell, the sea seemed to whisper back the same truth. It had always carried ancient, patient, eternal. I was never lost. I was never separate. I have always belonged. When you stand in the rain and feel the drops touch your skin, remember the journey of the raindrop. It falls not to disappear, but to return. It dissolves not to end, but to remember its wholeness. So too, when you feel small or afraid, when life feels uncertain or heavy, remember that you are not falling away, you are falling home. Trust the unfolding, trust the belonging. For you, like the raindrop, were never apart from the ocean of life. You only forgot the truth that waits quietly within you. You were never lost. In the mountains where the clouds rested low and the air smelled of pine and stone, there stood a monastery known for its stillness. From sunrise to sunset, the sound of the wind moving through the bamboo could be heard across its courtyards, soft and unending. Travelers who came near said it was a place where even time seemed to slow down. Among the monks who lived there was a young disciple named Ken. He was devoted, bright, and full of questions. Every morning he followed his teacher, Master Sho, studying his movements, his gestures, and his silences. Sho was known for his calm presence. When he walked, the birds did not fly away. When he spoke, his words were few but carried the weight of mountains. Ken admired his master deeply, yet he was often troubled by how little the master said. "He teaches us so much by doing nothing," the older monks would whisper. But Ken wanted to understand. He longed for answers, for clarity, for the secret of peace that seemed to live effortlessly within his teacher. One evening, as the sun melted into gold beyond the mountains, Ken approached the master in the meditation hall. The air was cool and smelled faintly of sandalwood. Sho sat cross-legged in front of the altar, eyes half closed, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. Ken bowed deeply. "Master," he said softly, "forgive me if I disturb your silence, but I must ask you something." Sho opened his eyes slowly, calm as still water. "Ask," he said. Ken hesitated. "I have studied for years. I pray, I meditate, I follow the teachings faithfully, yet peace escapes me. My thoughts are loud, my heart restless, my mind never still. Please, Master, tell me what is the secret of peace." The old monk looked at him for a long time, then smiled gently. He said nothing. Ken waited. A minute passed, then another. The only sound was the wind outside, moving through the bamboo grove. The leaves whispered softly, a sound like breathing. Ken shifted, confused. "Master," he said again, "did you hear me? I asked for the secret of peace." Sho nodded once, still silent. Ken frowned. "Please," he begged, "I came to you because I truly wish to understand. If you do not tell me, how can I learn?" The master looked at him kindly, but his lips did not move. His gaze turned toward the bamboo swaying in the courtyard. The silence deepened until even the insects seemed to pause. Ken felt his frustration rise. "Why won't you speak?" he demanded, forgetting himself. "Do you mean to test me? Am I unworthy of the answer?" Still, the master remained silent. Ken clenched his fists. His thoughts churned like a storm. He wanted to shout, to demand an explanation. But as he looked at his teacher's face so calm, so untroubled, something inside him began to shift. The wind continued to whisper through the bamboo, steady and unbroken. Slowly, Ken sat down on the floor. His heart still pounded. but the longer he sat, the quieter it became. The sound of his own breathing filled his ears. The master sat unmoving, eyes closed again, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm as gentle as the tide. Minutes turned to hours. The moon climbed above the temple roof. The silence no longer felt empty, it felt alive. Ken began to notice things he had never noticed before: the faint creak of the wooden beams, the soft crackle of the lantern flame, the call of a distant bird, the hush between the wind's sighs. Each sound appeared and disappeared into the same stillness. His thoughts came and went like clouds drifting across a wide sky. When dawn touched the horizon with pale gold, Ken realized the master had not moved all night. He bowed deeply and whispered, "I understand." The master opened his eyes and smiled, as if to confirm what Ken already knew. "Do you?" he asked. Ken nodded. "Yes, the universe speaks best when I stop speaking." Shou's eyes softened. "Then keep listening," he said. That morning, the monastery was as quiet as always, but for Ken, the silence was different. It was no longer something to endure, it was a teacher. When he walked through the bamboo grove, he could hear the rhythm of life in every sound: the drip of water from the roof, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet, the sigh of wind through leaves. Each sound rose from stillness and returned to it. For the first time, Ken realized peace was not something to find. It was something that had always been there, waiting beneath the noise. As days became weeks, he began to understand why his master spoke so little. Whenever he was tempted to ask a question, he remembered that long night and chose instead to listen. Slowly, his need for answers faded. When he meditated, thoughts still came, but he no longer fought them. They were like the wind in the bamboo passing, harmless, part of something greater. One afternoon, a nobleman arrived at the temple seeking wisdom. He had heard of Master Shou's silence and wanted to test it. When the monks gathered in the courtyard, the man stepped forward and said loudly, "Master Shou, I have traveled far to ask one question. What is truth?" Shou, sitting on the steps, looked up but said nothing. The nobleman laughed bitterly. "They say you are wise, yet you cannot even answer this. Are you silent because you have nothing to say?" Shou remained still. He picked up a small stone from the ground and held it in his palm for a moment, then placed it gently on the step beside him. The nobleman frowned. "What is this? A trick?" Shou said nothing. The wind moved through the courtyard, rustling the bamboo. After a long pause, Shou finally said, "Listen." The nobleman looked around, irritated. "To what?" Shou closed his eyes. The man hesitated, then listened. All he could hear was the wind. The sound was steady, endless, simple. Slowly, something in him softened. The wind carried no message, yet it filled the air completely. After a while, he turned back to the master. "Is this your answer?" he asked quietly. Shou opened his eyes. "Yes," he said. "The truth does not speak in words." That evening, when the monks gathered in the hall, Ken asked, "Master, how did the nobleman take your answer?" Shou smiled. "He wanted a sound," he said. "I gave him silence." The monks laughed softly. Ken looked at the moonlight spilling through the window. "When I was young, I thought truth was something to be explained," he said. Shou nodded. "And now?" Ken smiled. "Now I think truth is something to be heard." Shou's eyes glimmered. "And silence is the ear." As months passed, Ken changed. He no longer hurried through his chores. When he swept the courtyard, he listened to the broom's whisper on the stones. When he drew water from the well, he heard each drop fall like a note in a song. Even his breathing became a kind of prayer. Silence was no longer the absence of sound, it was the background of life itself. It was the space that allowed everything to be. One morning, a young novice came to him while he was raking leaves. "Brother Ken," the boy said, "how do I quiet my mind? When I try to meditate, I hear everything, my breathing, my thoughts, the wind. I can't find silence." Ken leaned on his rake and smiled. "You cannot make silence," he said. "It is already here. You only need to stop trying to cover it with noise." The boy frowned. "But my mind keeps talking." Ken nodded. "Let it. The mind is like a bird that sings because it can. The secret is not to silence the bird, but to listen to the sky that holds the song." The boy bowed, still puzzled but comforted. Years passed. Seasons came and went. The once young disciple became a teacher himself. When people came to him with their worries, asking for peace, he often said little. He would lead them into the bamboo grove, where the wind spoke its endless truth. One evening, a woman arrived carrying sorrow heavy as stone. Her husband had died in a storm, and no prayer could quiet her grief. "Please," she said to Ken, "tell me how to stop this pain." Ken's eyes were kind. "Come," he said. They walked through the grove in silence. The woman wept softly, but after a while her crying grew quiet. She began to notice the sound of the leaves, the way the air seemed to breathe with her. After some time, Ken said, "Listen." "To what?" she asked. "The wind," he said. "It moves through everything, but it holds on to nothing. The sound you hear is the sound of letting go." She closed her eyes and listened. Her tears fell freely now, but they no longer felt like suffering. They felt like part of the wind. When they returned to the temple, she bowed deeply. "Thank you," she whispered. Ken shook his head. "Thank the silence," he said. "It teaches better than I ever could." Many years later, Ken sat beside his master in the courtyard for the last time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold. Shou's hair was white, his hands thin, but his eyes still clear. "Master," Ken said, "you once taught me that peace lives in silence. I have spent my life listening to it, but I still wonder, why is silence so powerful?" Shou smiled. "Because silence is not empty," he said. "It is full of everything we keep trying to say." Ken looked toward the horizon where the stars were beginning to appear. "When I was young, I thought wisdom was hidden in words," he said softly. "And now?" Shou asked. Ken smiled faintly. "Now I think wisdom hides in the spaces between them." Shou nodded. "Then you have learned to hear." They sat quietly as the light faded, neither speaking again. The bamboo whispered gently above them, and the silence that filled the air was deep and kind. When night came, the monks found them still sitting side by side. Shou's eyes were closed, his face serene. Ken touched his teacher's hand and whispered, "Thank you for your silence." The next morning, the temple bells rang softly. The wind moved through the bamboo, carrying the master's lesson across the valley. Peace is not something to be taught or found. It is already here, waiting beneath the noise. Years later, people came to the monastery seeking the secret of peace. When they asked the old monk who led the temple what his master had taught him, he would smile and say, "He taught me nothing." The visitors would look puzzled. "Nothing?" they would ask. He would nod. "Yes, and that nothing was everything." Many would leave, still confused, but a few would stay. They would sit in the courtyard, listening to the wind rustle the bamboo, and slowly they would begin to hear the same silence that had taught generations before them. And in that silence, they would discover what all seekers eventually learn. The universe speaks best when you stop speaking. When words fall quiet, what remains is not emptiness, it is peace itself, whispering softly through the bamboo, eternal and alive. At the edge of a small coastal village, where the sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon, there lived an old fisherman named Tao. Every morning, long before the sun appeared, he would walk to the shore with his worn net slung over his shoulder. His hands were calloused from years of pulling ropes, his back bent from the weight of the sea's labor, yet his eyes still carried the quiet brightness of someone who loved the rhythm of life. For Tao, The sea was both a companion and a mystery. He spoke to it often, sometimes in gratitude, sometimes in frustration, but always with respect. "You and I," he would say to the waves, "we understand each other. You keep your treasures, and I keep my patience." One morning, after a night of strong winds, Tao pushed his small wooden boat into the restless water. The tide was high, and the waves struck against the sides of his vessel, but he rowed steadily, trusting his routine. He cast his net in the place he always did, where the seafloor dipped deep and the fish often gathered in silver clouds. He waited as the net sank. The water shimmered with the reflection of the rising Sunday. He pulled at the ropes, feeling the familiar weight of the catch beneath the surface. A small smile touched his face. "Ah," he said softly, "today will be good." But when he began to draw the net in, his smile faded. The resistance grew lighter, then vanished altogether. When he lifted the net into the boat, his heart sank. It was torn, ripped wide open, the ropes frayed and broken. Every fish had escaped. Only water poured through his fingers. For a long moment, Tao stared at the ruined net. The sea, calm again after the night's storm, seemed to mock him with its glittering silence. He could almost hear the laughter of the waves. "You took them back," he whispered bitterly. He dropped the net and buried his face in his hands. "All my work," he muttered, "all my care, and for nothing." The old fisherman sat in his small boat, letting it drift. Around him, the sea moved gently, unaware of his sorrow. The sunlight danced across the surface, and beneath it, life swam freely, fish darting in schools, unseen but abundant. Yet Tao saw none of it. His eyes were filled with loss. When he returned to shore, the villagers came to greet him. "Tao," one of them called, "what did you bring today?" The old man shook his head. "Nothing," he said. "The net tore. The sea has taken everything." They sighed in sympathy. "Bad luck," one said. "You work so hard. It isn't fair." Tao only nodded. "It seems the sea has grown tired of me." That night, he sat by his small fire, mending what he could of the net. The rope was old and thin. It would take many days to repair. His hands ached with every stitch. The wind whispered outside, carrying the faint sound of waves. "Why do you take so much and give so little?" Tao murmured to the sea beyond the hills. "Have I not given you enough of my years?" He lay down beside the fire, but sleep did not come. In his dreams, he saw the torn net again, heavy with emptiness. When morning came, Tao rose with the same weariness that had followed him through the night. He walked down to the shore with his half-mended net, though he knew he could not yet fish. The tide was low, and the sea lay stretched before him like glass. The world was quiet. He sat on a rock, looking out at the water. It sparkled in the early light, calm and unbothered. Seabirds glided above, dipping their wings to the surface. Tiny fish leaped and vanished again in flashes of silver. Tao watched, and for the first time in many days, he noticed the beauty of it. He leaned forward, eyes squinting against the Sunday beneath the surface. Life shimmered. There were fish everywhere, so many that the sea itself seemed alive with motion. They swam close to shore, their scales glinting like coins scattered across the water. Tao blinked in wonder. "So many," he whispered. "More than I've ever seen." He laughed softly at the sight, the sound breaking the still air. "And I thought you took them from me," he said to the sea. "But look, you were only showing me what I could never see while I was too busy holding on." The water lapped at the rock where he sat. A wave reached up to touch his feet, cool and clear. Tao felt something loosen in his chest. "The fish were never mine," he said aloud. "They only passed through my hands for a while." He sat there until the tide began to rise again, covering the rocks and his feet. When he finally stood, his heart was lighter. He carried his net back home, not with sorrow, but with quiet acceptance. That evening, The sky turned red over the horizon, and Tao cooked a small meal of rice and vegetables. The sea's sound filled the air outside his hut. For the first time in years, he did not feel the need to compete with its rhythm. He understood now that the ocean's wealth was never something to possess, it was something to witness. The next morning, he took his repaired net and rowed back out to sea. He cast it once more into the water, not with expectation, but with gratitude. Whether it returned full or empty no longer mattered. When he pulled it back, the net came up heavy with fish, their scales flashing like mirrors in the sunlight. Tao smiled. "You always give back what you take," he said softly to the sea. "Only when the heart stops grasping can the hands truly receive." He released most of the fish back into the water, keeping only what he needed for the day. The rest vanished into the depths, and he watched them go with joy instead of regret. From that day on, Tao fished differently. He no longer chased after large catches or counted his fortune by what filled his boat. He came to see each cast of the net as a conversation with the universe, an act of giving and receiving that needed no measure of success or failure. Sometimes he returned home with an abundance of fish, and sometimes with none, but always he returned with peace. The villagers began to notice a change in him. "Tao," one said, "you seem happier these days. You laugh even when your nets are empty." The old man smiled. "Because they are never truly empty," he said. "The sea is full whether or not I can see it." The villagers laughed. "You speak in riddles again, old man." Tao chuckled. "Perhaps," he said, "but maybe one day you'll understand." As the seasons turned, Tao became known not only as a fisherman, but as a teacher of sorts. Travelers came to his village to ask about his calm, his contentment. They would find him sitting by the shore, mending his net or watching the sunset. When they asked for his secret, he would point to the water and say, "Look." They would gaze out at the waves, puzzled. "What should we look at?" they would ask. "The shimmer," he'd reply. "You see, the water is always alive, even when it seems still. That is how life is full, even in the moments we call empty." Once, a young merchant came to him, distraught after losing his fortune in a storm. "I have lost everything," he said bitterly. "All my ships, all my goods gone. How can I begin again?" Tao looked at him with quiet eyes. "When I lost my fish," he said, "I thought I had lost my life. But I had only lost my idea of ownership. The sea does not take, it only returns things to where they belong. When you stop calling what passes through your hands mine, you stop losing altogether." The merchant frowned. "That is easy to say when you have nothing left to lose." Tao smiled. "It is easiest to see when you have nothing left to lose." The merchant was silent, staring out at the horizon. The old fisherman stood and cast his net into the water. When he drew it back, it was empty. He smiled as he held it up. "See this?" he said. "Empty, yet full. It caught nothing, yet it has already given me everything I need." The merchant watched, confused. "What do you mean?" "The sea has reminded me that I am alive," Tao said, "that I can still throw the net, that I can still trust." The merchant bowed his head. For the first time since his loss, he felt something like peace. Years passed, and Tao grew older. His hands trembled when he mended his nets, and his steps slowed when he walked to the shore. Yet each morning, he still made his way to the sea. The villagers often offered to fish for him, but he always refused. "The sea and I," he would say, "still have things to say to each other." One dawn, as the sky was turning from grey to pink, Tao pushed his small boat into the calm water. He cast his net once more and waited, feeling the quiet rhythm of the waves beneath him. The water sparkled all around, and he thought of the first time his net had torn, the sorrow that had once filled his heart. He smiled. "You tore my net," he whispered to the sea, "but it was to mend my sight." The sun rose, spreading light across the horizon. Tao watched as the fish leapt and swam beneath the surface, the ocean alive with motion. He did not pull his net back right away. He let it drift. He let it be. When he finally drew it in, it was empty again. He laughed softly. "You never disappoint," he said. That afternoon, the villagers found his boat drifting near the shore. Tao was sitting upright, his hands resting gently on the net, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. The sea was calm around him, and the light danced across the water. It was as if the sea itself had carried him home. They brought his boat back to the beach and buried him near the place where he had always fished. Above his resting place, they built a small stone marker. On it, they carved the words he had once spoken. "The fish were never mine. The sea was always full." Over the years, people from distant lands came to see the fisherman's stone. Many would sit by the shore for hours, watching the waves shimmer with life. Some would cry for what they had lost. Others would simply breathe and feel their hearts grow lighter. And slowly, they too began to understand what Tao had seen that morning long ago, the truth that loss is not the end, but a reminder. The universe does not take to punish us. It only frees our hands to see what has always been there. When we stop clinging, we begin to see abundance. When we stop calling things mine, we discover that nothing is missing. And somewhere beyond the horizon, where the sea meets the sky, the old fisherman's laughter still echoes with the wind, gentle and eternal, whispering, "The fish were never mine. The sea was always enough." At the base of an ancient mountain, where the earth gave birth to rivers and valleys, a small stream flowed endlessly. Its voice was soft but steady, whispering to the stones it carried, to the trees that bent to drink, and to the wind that paused to listen. It had been there for longer than memory could recall, shaping the land with patience only time could understand. In that stream lay a single stone. It was large and heavy, dark grey with flecks of silver hidden deep inside. For hundreds of years, the water had flowed around it, over it, and sometimes even through it, pushing against its sides day and night without rest. At first, the stone had accepted its place, but as the years passed, it began to grow weary of the stream's endless touch. "Why do you never stop?" The stone grumbled one morning. "You never let me rest. Every moment you push, you pull, you wear me down. For centuries you have flowed over me, taking pieces of me away. Have you no kindness?" The stream laughed softly, a sound like music. "Kindness," it said. "Is that what you think I lack?" The stone frowned. "What else could it be? You move constantly, always pressing against me. I have no peace. Once I was proud and strong. Now I am small, round, and smooth. You are stealing me away, piece by piece." The stream flowed more gently for a moment, its water curling around the stone like a caress. "You do not see what I see," it said. "You think I take from you, but I only give. I polish you because I love you." The stone was silent. It did not understand. The stream continued, its voice calm and clear. "When you first came to rest in my bed, you were rough and sharp. You hurt the fish that brushed against you and tore the roots that tried to grow nearby. You did not mean to harm, but your edges were hard and unyielding. I could not leave you that way, so I began to shape you, slowly, patiently, with my touch. I did not ask to be shaped," the stone said bitterly. "I was fine as I was." The stream chuckled again, its laughter echoing softly through the valley. "Were you? Tell me, do you think the mountain above complains when the rain falls upon it? Do you think the sky protests when the sun sets? Everything changes, my friend. You are not being diminished, you are being refined." The stone said nothing more. It did not want to admit that the stream's words stirred something within it. For many days, it remained quiet. The water flowed on, as it always did, carrying leaves and light across the surface. The stone watched the world move around it, the clouds drifting above, the seasons coming and going, the birds that built nests in the trees by the shore. Time was patient, and so was the stream. Years passed. The stone grew, smoother. Its rough edges faded until it gleamed faintly when the sun touched it. It began to see how the water reflected the world, the sky, the trees, even its own surface. It began to wonder if the stream had been right all along. One morning the stream asked softly, "Do you still think I am cruel?" The stone hesitated. "I do not know," it said. "You have worn away much of me. I am not who I once was." The stream smiled in its silent way. "No one ever is." The stone thought about this for a long time. It thought about how it had changed, not just in shape, but in what it saw. When it had been rough, it could not reflect the sky. Now, in the calm of dawn, it could see the blue of heaven shimmering on its surface. The stream's touch, once an irritation, had become something else, gentle, rhythmic, soothing. Still, there was a trace of sadness in the stone. "You say you polish me because you love me," it said quietly, "but love should not hurt." The stream's voice softened. "Sometimes love must flow where comfort cannot. If I stopped touching you, if I left you alone, moss would cover your face, and you would sink into darkness. You would forget the sunlight, forget what it feels like to shine. I touch you not to harm you, but to keep you alive in the light." The stone trembled slightly beneath the current. The stream's words were truth, though they carried a weight that was hard to hold. Over time, the stone began to listen more closely, not just to the stream, but to everything. It heard the sigh of the wind through the reeds, the laughter of the frogs at night, the whisper of rain joining the flow. Each sound carried a lesson, quiet and eternal. One day, a young monk came to the stream. He was weary from his journey, burdened by disappointment. He knelt by the water's edge, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. Then he noticed the smooth stone gleaming beneath the surface. Its calm beauty caught his eye, and he reached down to touch it. "Strange," he said aloud, "how something so solid can be shaped by something so soft." The stream, always listening, chuckled. "The soft can shape the hard because it does not give up." The monk blinked, certain he had imagined the voice. "Who speaks?" he asked. The water rippled. "You hear me because you need to," the stream said. "You carry your burdens as heavily as this stone once did. You think life pushes against you unfairly. But what if every challenge is only polishing your soul?" The monk frowned. "It feels cruel," he said softly. "I have lost so much. My teacher died, my temple burned, and I am left with nothing. How can that be polishing?" The stream sighed. "Loss reveals what is lasting. You believe you have nothing, but you are still here, still breathing, still capable of kindness. Pain is not punishment, it is refinement." The monk gazed into the water, watching the ripples spread outward. "I do not know if I can believe that yet." "That is all right," the stream replied gently. "Belief comes later. For now, just keep flowing." The monk smiled faintly, wiped his tears, and bowed to the stream. "Thank you," he whispered. He left a small offering, a white flower, and continued on his way. The stone, who had listened silently, felt something stir within it. "You speak such comfort to him," it said to the stream. "And yet you never stop pressing against me. You seem so gentle with others." The stream laughed softly. "I give to each what they need. He needed words. You needed touch." The stone smiled for the first time in centuries. "Then I suppose I should be grateful for both." "Gratitude," the stream said, "is the beginning of peace." As the years turned into decades, the stone's bitterness faded completely. It began to love the sound of the water, the cool embrace of the current, the way the sunlight played on its smooth surface. It began to feel proud of the shine it carried, the quiet proof of all it had endured. Then one day, a great flood came. The mountains released torrents of rain, and the stream swelled into a river. The water rushed faster than ever before, lifting everything in its path. The stone, so long settled in its place, felt itself being moved for the first time in centuries. "Where are you taking me?" it cried as the water carried it away. The stream's voice rose above the roar. "To where you belong." "I thought I already belonged here," the stone said, frightened. "You did," the stream replied, "but even stillness must move when it is time." The river carried the stone far down the valley, past forests and fields, until the land widened and the air began to taste of salt. At last, it reached the ocean, where the waves stretched to infinity. There, the stream became one with the sea. The stone sank gently to the ocean floor, surrounded by countless others, smooth, shining, each with its own story of endurance. The water around it was vast and quiet. For the first time, the stone understood the full meaning of what the stream had said long ago. "I polish you because I love you," it whispered to itself. "You did not push me away to hurt me, you carried me to the place where I could finally rest." Above the surface, the waves shimmered beneath the sun, endless and eternal. The stone lay beneath them, no longer burdened by what it had been, but grateful for all it had become. Centuries later, a child walked along the shore and found the stone resting among the shells. It fit perfectly in his small hand, smooth and cool to the touch. He turned it over and over, marveling at its quiet beauty. "Look, mother," he said. "It's so shiny." The woman smiled. "That's what the sea does, my dear. It makes things smooth." The child laughed and tossed the stone back into the waves. It sank gently, content to return to the water. The sea cradled it as the stream once had, whispering through the tides, "Nothing is lost, my friend. Everything is shaped, softened, and returned." And so the stone rested, understanding at last that every push, every hardship, every storm had been an act of love from the universe, a patient hand polishing its surface until it could finally reflect the light. When the waves broke upon the shore, their song carried the same truth the stream had spoken long ago. Every hardship is the universe shaping our smoothness. For in the great rhythm of life, nothing is wasted. Every wound becomes wisdom, every loss becomes light, and every rough edge becomes part of something beautiful. The water that once seemed cruel was never cruel at all. It was love in motion, teaching the stone to shine. In the mountains, far from the noise of cities and villages, there stood an ancient monastery carved into the cliffs. The monks who lived there were few, their lives quiet and devoted to meditation, study, and the tending of simple tasks. The mountain itself seemed to guard their peace, wrapping them in mist each morning and bathing them in golden light each evening. Among these monks was one named Rin. He was young, earnest, and full of questions. Every dawn he rose before the sun, swept the temple floors, and lit candles in the meditation hall. As the flames flickered to life, he would bow deeply, whispering prayers of gratitude for the light. Yet, though he performed this duty every day, he did not truly understand what light meant, not yet. Rin had joined the monastery as a child, left there by his parents after a famine had taken everything they owned. The monks had raised him kindly, teaching him discipline and compassion. Over the years, he grew strong and steady, but in his heart lingered a quiet restlessness. He often wondered about his purpose, why he was here, what it meant to live wisely, and what enlightenment truly was. One evening, after the sun had set and the monastery was bathed in darkness, the old master, Jorin, called for Rin. "Come," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I have a task for you." Rin bowed. "Yes, master." Jorin handed him a small candle. "Take this into the cave behind the temple," he said. "Stay there until dawn. light the candle and guard its flame through the night. Watch it carefully. Do not let it go out." Rin took the candle reverently, unsure what lesson his master intended, but trusting his words. He walked through the courtyard, past the rows of sleeping monks, until he reached the mouth of the cave. The air inside was cool and heavy, filled with the scent of earth and silence. He lit the candle, and the small flame sprang to life, pushing back the darkness in a trembling circle of light. The cave's walls glistened faintly, damp with moisture. Shadows danced across the stone like living things. Rin sat cross-legged before the flame, his eyes fixed on its flicker. At first, he felt peaceful. The candle's light was soft and steady, and its warmth comforted him in the deep stillness of the cave. But as the night deepened, the wind began to sigh through the entrance, making the flame waver. Rin leaned closer, shielding it with his hands. He whispered, "Stay alive, little flame. I will protect you." Hours passed. The candle burned lower, wax pooled around its base. The flame dimmed, then brightened, struggling against the drafts that slipped through the cave. Rin grew tired, but he did not close his eyes. He watched every movement of the light, guarding it as if it were a living being. When he grew restless, he thought of his master's words, "Watch carefully, do not let it go out." And so he did. He watched as insects flew into the flame and vanished in a moment of brightness. He watched how the light painted every surface differently, how it could make even the roughest stone look gentle. He watched how it created both light and shadow at once, never one without the other. As the hours crept by, the flame grew smaller. Rin felt a strange sadness rise in him. He realized he had come to love the light, to feel responsible for it. He feared what would happen when it finally went out. But just before dawn, when the cave's darkness began to thin and the first hints of morning touched the world, something shifted. Through the cave's mouth, Rin saw a faint line of gold spreading across the horizon. The sun was rising. He looked at the candle, still flickering bravely, and then at the growing light outside. Slowly, the darkness began to lift. The cave, once dependent on his small flame, began to glow with a new kind of brightness, vast, limitless, and warm. Rin looked down at the candle in his hands. Its flame now seemed small, almost shy before the power of the Sunday. For a moment he hesitated, uncertain. Then, gently, he blew it out. Smoke rose in a thin line, curling upward until it vanished into the air. The cave, though silent, was no longer dark. The sun's light filled every corner effortlessly. Rin sat there for a long time, watching as the rays reached deeper into the cave. He felt something open inside him, something that no words could name. When he returned to the monastery, the master was waiting for him in the courtyard, seated beneath a tree. The morning sun bathed him in light. Rin bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "I did as you asked. I guarded the candle all night, and when the dawn came, I blew it out." Jorin nodded, his eyes bright. "And what did you learn?" Rin hesitated. "At first, I thought the candle was my light to protect. I believed its flame was precious because it was small and fragile, but when the sun rose, I saw how foolish that was. The sun does not need guarding. It gives light to everything without effort. The candle was never the source of light, it was only its keeper for a time." The master smiled. "And what of yourself?" Rin looked down. "I think I am like the candle. I keep a small flame, my effort, my will, but I am not the light itself. The true light comes from something far greater than me. When I let go of thinking it belonged to me, I saw the sun everywhere." The master nodded approvingly. "Then you have seen what most never do. All of us carry a small flame, a gift we are asked to tend. But it is not ours to own. When we remember this, we stop living in fear that our light will go out. The sun within and around us never fades." Rin bowed again, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, master." That day, he went about his chores with a new stillness in his heart. The world seemed brighter, not because the sun had changed, but because he had. He noticed how the light touched everything equally, the stones, the trees, even the shadows. He realized that nothing in nature tried to shine on its own. It simply reflected the light that already was. In the days that followed, Rin found himself thinking often of the candle. He began to see its lesson in every part of life. When he helped a younger monk learn to read, he thought, "I am only passing on the light that was given to me." When he tended the garden and saw new shoots pushing through the soil, he thought, "The sun brings life to all things. My hands are only its helpers." Months passed, and one evening the monastery lost power during a great storm. The winds howled across the mountain, and the halls fell into darkness. The monks hurried to light candles, their small flames flickering in the wind. Rin watched as the shadows danced wildly across the walls. One of the younger monks, frightened by the storm, clutched his candle tightly. "Brother Rin," he said, "what if our candles blow out? Then we will be lost in the dark." Rin smiled gently. "Don't fear the dark, little one," he said. "The sun has only hidden for a while. It will return. Our candles are only reminders of what is never truly gone." The young monk frowned. "But without light, how can we see?" Rin knelt beside him. "Close your eyes," he said softly. "Listen to the wind, feel the air on your skin. Even now, you are surrounded by life. The light may leave your eyes, but it never leaves the world." The boy nodded, comforted, and the two sat quietly as the storm passed. When morning came, sunlight flooded the halls once again, and the monks rejoiced. Rin stood by the window, feeling its warmth on his face. He whispered to himself, "The candle is gone, but the sun remains." Years went by. Rin became a teacher, wise and kind, known throughout the region for his calm. Many came to him with their worries, merchants afraid of losing their wealth, farmers anxious about their crops, parents grieving for their children. To each he would say, "You are not the source of your light. You are its keeper. When you try to own it, fear grows. When you tend it with humility, it shines without end." One day a traveler arrived at the monastery, weary and broken. He had lost everything: his home, his family, his faith. "I have failed," he told Rin bitterly. "Once I was strong, but now my flame has gone out. I am empty." Rin listened patiently. When the man had finished, he handed him a candle. "Take this," he said. "Go into the cave behind the temple tonight. Light it and keep it burning until morning. When the dawn comes, blow it out." The traveler frowned. "That is all?" Rin nodded. "Yes, all." That night, the man did as he was told. He sat in the darkness, watching the small flame fight against the wind. It flickered and wavered, but he shielded it carefully with his hands. As he watched, he began to see himself in the candle, fragile, struggling, uncertain. When dawn came, light spilled into the cave, washing over everything. The candle's glow faded in comparison, and the man suddenly understood. He blew it out, tears streaming down his face. He returned to Rin at sunrise, trembling but changed. "I see now," he said softly. "The light I thought I lost was never mine to begin with. I was only holding what the world had already given me." Rin smiled. "Yes, when you stop clinging to the candle, the sun has room to enter." The traveler bowed deeply. "Then I will carry the light differently from now on, not as something I own, but as something I serve." Rin placed a hand on his shoulder. "And in serving it, you will never lose it again." Years later, when Rin himself grew old and frail, the monks gathered around his bed. The air in his room was dim, lit by a single candle on the table beside him. As the end drew near, he asked the monks to open the window. "Let the sun in," he whispered. They did as he asked. and light filled the room, touching the folds of his robe, the lines of his face, the candle's small flame. Rin smiled weakly. "Blow it out," he said. The monks hesitated, unsure what he meant. Rin looked at them gently. "Blow it out," he repeated. "The sun is enough." They obeyed. The candle went dark, and Rin closed his eyes. His last breath left his body as quietly as smoke, leaving a flame. When the monks buried him, they placed a small carving of a candle on his stone, and beneath it they inscribed his final words. "I was never the source of light, only its keeper." From then on, the monks kept one candle burning in the meditation hall at all times, not to hold back the dark, but to remind them of what the old master had taught, that light is not something we create, but something we remember. And when the sun rose each morning over the mountain, filling the temple with golden light, they would bow before it in silence, whispering a prayer of gratitude for the truth that lives quietly in every dawn. The candle is small, but the sun never ends. We are not the light itself, only its keepers, blessed to carry its flame for a little while. In a quiet valley surrounded by mist-covered hills, there stood a small monastery where the air always smelled of pine and rain. The monks who lived there spent their days in silence, tending gardens, teaching children from the nearby village, and studying the rhythms of nature. Among them was a kind old teacher named Master Li. His presence was calm, his words gentle, and his eyes carried the patience of someone who had learned to trust time. Every spring, Master Li would invite the village children to the monastery to help in the garden. They would plant seeds, draw water from the stream, and watch how slowly life revealed its beauty when left undisturbed. Among the children was a boy named Kai. He was curious and bright, but also impatient. He loved to ask questions, and he wanted every answer immediately. One morning, while the monks were planting vegetables, Master Li gave Kai a special task. "Kai," he said, "there is a small tree behind the meditation hall. Look carefully at its branches. You will find a cocoon there. Visit it each day and tell me what you see." Kai ran off eagerly and soon found the cocoon. It hung delicately from a thin branch, pale gold in the sunlight. Inside, he could see faint movement, as if something were dreaming its way into life. "Master," Kai said, running back, "I found it. The butterfly is still sleeping, but it will wake soon, won't it?" Master Li smiled. "Perhaps, or perhaps not yet. Each life opens in its own time." Kai frowned. "But if I care for it, maybe it will come out faster." The master chuckled. "You may visit it, Kai, but do not disturb it. Just watch. Growth is something the universe tends to itself." For several days, Kai obeyed. Each morning, he checked the cocoon. Sometimes it seemed still, other times it trembled slightly. He watched how the sunlight warmed it and how the wind rocked it gently on the branch. He waited, but waiting was difficult for him. After a week, he began to worry. Maybe something is wrong, he thought. It should have come out by now. He asked Master Li, "Why doesn't the butterfly come out? Perhaps it's trapped. I could help it." The master shook his head. "Do not force what is not ready. The struggle to emerge is part of the becoming." But Kai couldn't stop thinking about the cocoon. That night, he dreamed of it, of wings pressing against the thin shell, of something small and desperate trying to breathe. When he woke, he decided to help. "I will set it free," he said to himself. "That will make it happy." He ran to the tree before sunrise, when the garden was still quiet. The cocoon was trembling again, and he could see tiny cracks forming. "It's trying so hard," he whispered. "It needs me." With careful fingers, he began to peel away the edges. The silk was thin, softer than he expected. He worked slowly, freeing the opening until the butterfly inside could push its way out. At last, the cocoon split open, and a small creature emerged. Its wings were wet and folded, its body trembling. Kai smiled in delight. "You're free now," he said. The butterfly crawled onto his finger, but it did not fly. Its wings remained small and weak, unable to unfold. The boy waited for them to stretch, but they never did. After a few moments, the butterfly shuddered and became still. Kai's smile faded. He stared at it in disbelief. "No, I helped you," he whispered. "Why won't you move?" He ran to Master Li, tears streaming down his face. "Master," he cried, "I tried to help the butterfly. It was trapped, and I opened the cocoon. But it didn't fly. It died. Why did this happen?" The master looked at the small, lifeless creature in the boy's hand. His eyes were sad, but not surprised. He led Kai to the garden and knelt beside him. "Kai," he said softly, "the butterfly was not trapped. It was becoming." The boy wiped his tears. "But it was struggling." "Yes," said the master, "because it needed to. The struggle to break free strengthens its wings. When you helped it too soon, you took away the very effort that gives it life." Kai stared down at the butterfly, his heart heavy. "I only wanted to help." "I know," said the master gently. "You acted from kindness, but kindness without understanding can harm. The universe has its own pace. Every life must meet its own resistance to grow strong enough to live." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We often do this with ourselves too," he said. "We try to escape our difficulties before they have finished shaping us. But it is the very weight we wish to remove that builds our strength." Kai said nothing. He buried the small butterfly beneath the tree and sat beside it for a long time. The morning light filtered through the branches, warming the earth. Slowly, his tears dried. From that day, he visited the tree every morning, not to find another cocoon, but to sit quietly and watch. He began to notice how everything in the garden took its time. The flowers did not bloom all at once. The seeds pushed slowly through the soil, one leaf at a time. Even the stream beside the temple carved its path with patience, shaping the stones over years. One afternoon, as he sat by the tree, Master Li joined him. "What do you see today, Kai?" he asked. Kai smiled faintly. "I see how everything grows without hurry. The flowers open when they are ready, and even the trees take their time to reach the sky." "I think I understand what you meant." The master nodded. "The same is true for you," he said. "Your thoughts, your wisdom, your peace, all of these will come in their season. You cannot rush the unfolding of your spirit." Kai looked up. "But sometimes it's hard to wait." The master smiled. "That is the lesson the universe teaches over and over. Waiting is not doing nothing. It is allowing what already works within you to find its own rhythm. The river never forces its flow. It trusts gravity to carry it forward." Kai looked thoughtful. "So the butterfly needed its struggle, just as I need mine." "Yes," said the master, "struggle is not the enemy. It is the sculptor." Years passed, and Kai grew into a young man. He stayed at the monastery, learning from Master Li and from the world around him. He became known for his calm patience and his steady heart. The villagers often came to him for advice. One day, a woman arrived with her young daughter. The girl was crying. In her hands, she held a small box. "She found a cocoon," the mother explained, "and tried to help the butterfly. Now it won't move." Kai looked at the girl with gentle eyes. He recognized the story immediately. "I see," he said softly. "I once did the same." The girl looked up through her tears. "You did?" He nodded. "Yes, I wanted to help because I could not bear to see something struggle. But I learned that the struggle was not cruelty, it was love in disguise." The girl frowned. "Love?" "Yes," said Kai. "The universe gives each creature what it needs to become whole. The butterfly's struggle builds the strength in its wings. The child's struggle builds the strength in her heart. and the soul's struggle teaches trust. He led her outside to the garden. The air was filled with the hum of bees and the scent of blossoms. "Do you see that tree?" he asked. The girl nodded. "When it was young, I buried a butterfly beneath it," he said. "I learned that day that we cannot make life move faster than it is meant to. We can only walk beside it and trust that it knows the way." The girl looked up at the branches above, where sunlight filtered through the leaves. Her tears stopped. "So, it's okay to wait?" she asked. Kai smiled. "It's not only okay, it's necessary." The mother bowed to him in gratitude, and together they left the garden. Kai stood for a while, listening to the wind move through the branches. The sound was soft, like the whisper of wings. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Master Li found him sitting by the tree again. "You have become patient, Kai," he said. "Do you see how your own growth mirrored the butterflies?" Kai nodded. "Yes, Master. I see that everything I once thought was holding me back was actually carrying me forward." The Master smiled. "That is surrender," he said. "Not giving up, but giving in to the natural rhythm of life. When you stop fighting the pace of the universe, you discover that it was never working against you." The years continued to flow like the river beside the monastery. The garden flourished, the trees grew taller, and Master Li grew older. When his final days came, he called Kai to his side. "You have learned well," he said. "Now remember this: do not force wisdom to come. Let it ripen like fruit on the tree. When it is ready, it will fall into your hands." After the master's passing, Kai became the new teacher of the monastery. His presence carried the same peace that once surrounded his teacher. Every spring, he invited the village children to visit, just as Master Li had done long ago. One morning, he found a boy standing beneath the same tree, staring intently at a cocoon. The boy looked anxious. "It's been so long," he said. "I think it needs help." Kai smiled gently. "Once, I thought the same. But tell me, would you pull open a flower before it blooms? Would you demand the sun to rise before dawn?" The boy shook his head. "Then do not open the cocoon," Kai said. "The butterfly is teaching you patience. When it is ready, it will emerge, and its wings will be strong enough to carry it wherever it must go. If you open it too soon, it will never fly." The boy hesitated, then nodded. "I'll wait." Kai placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good. And while you wait, breathe. Let the waiting teach you what rushing never will." Days later, the cocoon finally broke open. The butterfly emerged, trembling but alive. Its wings unfolded slowly, drying in the sun until they glowed like gold. When it lifted into the air, the boy laughed aloud, his heart full of wonder. He ran to Kai, breathless. "It flew. It really flew," Kai smiled. "Yes, because you let it find its own strength. You trusted life to know its timing." The boy looked thoughtful. "So, the best way to help sometimes is to wait?" "Yes," said Kai softly. "Waiting is not inaction, it is faith in motion." Years later, when Kai grew old and sat alone beneath the same tree, he often thought of the butterfly, of his teacher, of the lessons that had taken a lifetime to unfold. He realized that the universe had never hurried him, even when he had tried to hurry it. As the sun set one final time, painting the garden in gold, he whispered, "Thank you for teaching me to wait." The wind moved through the branches, carrying the sound of rustling leaves, the soft echo of wings long gone, yet somehow still present. And so the lesson lived on, whispered from teacher to student, from child to child, from heart to heart. Do not force the universe to open before its time. Surrender means letting growth happen naturally. The butterfly flies not because someone helped it, but because it found its strength through waiting. At the edge of an old forest stood a monastery known for its peace. It was a place where time seemed to move more slowly, where the wind itself carried a kind of wisdom. Every morning, the monks would sweep the stone paths, light incense, and bow toward the mountains that surrounded them like silent guardians. Among those monks was a young novice named Ren. He was thoughtful and kind, but often troubled by fear. Though he followed his duties with care, he worried about the change of seasons, the passing of time, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. He had joined the monastery seeking peace, but the thought of loss haunted him. One autumn morning, Master Ko, the elder monk who guided the novices, called Ren to walk with him. The forest was bright with color. Gold, red, and brown leaves painted the air each time the wind passed through the trees. The ground was covered in a soft carpet of fallen leaves, and the air smelled of earth and wood smoke. As they walked, Master Ko paused beneath a great maple tree. Its branches stretched wide over the path, its leaves glowing in the morning sunday. He looked up and said, "Ren, tell me what you see." Ren gazed at the tree for a moment. "I see beauty," he said, "but also sadness. The leaves are dying." The master smiled. "Dying?" he asked. "Is that what you see?" Ren hesitated. "Yes, master. Soon winter will come. The trees will be bare. The air will grow cold. Everything that is bright and alive now will fall away." Master Ko reached up and gently plucked a leaf from a low branch. It was red at the edges, golden in the center, trembling slightly between his fingers. He held it before Ren and said, "Watch closely." He released the leaf. It spun in the air, catching the sunlight, turning and twisting as it drifted downward. The wind lifted it once, twice, before it finally came to rest on the ground. "Did the leaf die?" the master asked softly. "Or did it return?" Ren frowned, unsure. "Return? To where?" "To the earth," the master said. "To the soil that gave it life. It has not ended, it has only changed its form. In time, it will become part of the tree again. Its fall is not an ending, but a beginning." Ren looked at the leaf lying gently on the path. "But it looked so afraid when it fell," he said. "It trembled." The master chuckled. "Ah, that trembling, you think it was fear? Perhaps it was only excitement." Ren smiled faintly, but the master could see the question still lingering in his eyes. "You are afraid of change," Ko said. "You hold too tightly to what was. But nature teaches us that all things move in cycles: birth, growth, decay, renewal. The leaf does not cling to the branch. When the time comes, it lets go. The wind carries it, and it trusts where it will land." Ren looked down, his voice quiet. "But master, I am not a leaf. When people I love leave, when things I care about end, how can I not be afraid?" The master placed a hand on his shoulder. "Fear comes when we forget that we, too, belong to the same rhythm. The leaf does not question the wind. It knows it is part of something larger. So are you." They walked in silence for a while. The path curved through the trees, the wind moving softly through the forest. Leaves fell all around them like slow, golden rain. That night, Ren sat outside his room, watching the moon rise above the mountains. The world was quiet, except for the sound of the wind moving through the bamboo near the temple wall. A single leaf drifted past him, catching the moonlight. He thought again of what the master had said. "Not dying," he whispered to himself. "Returning." He picked up the leaf and turned it in his hand. Its veins glowed faintly silver in the light. "Do you trust the wind?" he asked it softly. Of course, there was no answer, but somehow the question felt like a prayer. In the days that followed, Ren began to watch the leaves more closely. Each morning, he would stand beneath the maple tree and wait for one to fall. He noticed that no two leaves fell the same way. Some drifted gently, others spun wildly. Some landed close to the tree, others traveled far into the forest. Yet each one, no matter how it fell, came to rest somewhere soft on the ground, in the moss among the roots. He began to see something he had missed before, the grace in letting go. One morning, after a long night of wind and rain, the forest was thick with fallen leaves. Ren walked through them quietly, his feet brushing against the damp earth. He came to the stream that ran near the monastery and saw the water carrying leaves downstream. Some floated smoothly, others caught on rocks, turning slowly before the current released them again. He sat on the bank, watching the endless flow. The water did not hurry, and the leaves did not resist. They moved together, each following its own path without struggle. The master found him there. "You are learning from the stream," he said. Ren bowed slightly. "It seems so peaceful," he said. "Even the leaves that are caught on rocks are not trapped for long. The water frees them in time." Master Ko nodded. "The river does not cling to what passes through it, and the leaves do not fight the river. This is trust. When you trust the flow of life, you stop fearing where it carries you." Ren looked at the water, his reflection trembling on the surface. "But what if the current takes me somewhere I do not want to go?" The master smiled. "That is what fear always says. But the river has been flowing since before you were born. It carried your ancestors. It will carry your children. Do you think it does not know the way?" Ren thought about that for a long time. Winter came. The trees grew bare, the air sharp and clear. Snow fell quietly over the mountains, covering the monastery in white silence. The monks worked and meditated as always, moving slowly through the days. Ren missed the sound of the leaves, the colors of autumn, but he also felt something new inside him, a calm acceptance. He understood now that the stillness of winter was not death, it was rest. Beneath the snow, the roots waited patiently for spring. The world was not gone, it was only gathering strength. One afternoon, as he helped the master sweep snow from the temple steps, Ren said, "When the leaves fell, I thought they were lost, but now I see they were only changing. Is that how it is for us too, Master? When we fall, are we also returning?" Master Ko looked at him kindly. "Yes. Every ending is a return to the beginning. Every loss brings us back to the whole." Ren smiled faintly. "Then why do we cry when things end?" The master leaned on his broom, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Because our hearts have not yet learned what the wind already knows, that nothing truly leaves. The form changes, but the essence remains." Spring returned. The snow melted, the river swelled, and tiny green shoots appeared on the branches that had seemed dead all winter. The forest was alive again, full of sound and scent. Ren stood beneath the maple tree that had shed its leaves months ago. New buds had begun to open, small and bright. He felt an ache in his chest, not sorrow this time, but awe. Life had continued, quietly and faithfully. Master Ko came to stand beside him. "The leaf you mourned has become this new one," he said. "It has returned through the earth, through the rain, through the roots. The cycle continues, as it always will." Ren bowed. "Then there is no need to fear the fall." The master smiled. "No more than the earth fears the rain." Years passed, and Ren grew older. He became a teacher himself, known for his gentleness and the way he could bring calm to even the most restless heart. People came to him from distant villages, burdened by their fears, fear of loss, of change, of death. To each he would tell the story of the leaf and the wind. He would say, "When the leaf trembles, it is not because it is falling, it is because it is learning to fly." Trust turns fear into flight. One autumn, a traveler arrived at the monastery carrying grief heavier than stone. His wife had died that year, and he could not let her go. He sought Ren's wisdom, hoping to find peace. Ren led him to the maple tree, now old and enormous. Its leaves glowed gold in the fading light. They stood in silence until one leaf loosened from its branch and began its slow descent. "Look," Ren said, What do you see? The traveler watched. I see a leaf falling. Ren smiled gently. Watch again. The wind rose, catching the leaf and spinning it upward for a moment before letting it settle softly on the ground. The traveler's eyes filled with tears. I see the wind carrying it home. Ren nodded. Yes, it is not falling, it is returning. The traveler bowed his head. Then my wife, she is not lost either? Ren placed a hand on his shoulder. No one is lost. The ones we love return in new forms, in the wind, in the rain, in the hearts they touched. When you breathe, she breathes with you. When you let go of your sorrow, you feel her more clearly, not less. The traveler wept quietly, and the wind moved through the trees, carrying away his pain like fallen leaves down a stream. That night, Ren sat by his window, watching the moon rise above the forest. A single leaf drifted past, caught in the silver light. He whispered to it, "Thank you for teaching me." When his final days came, Ren sat beneath the same maple tree, now older than he had ever been. His hair had turned white, and his hands trembled, but his eyes still held the calm of the forest. A young monk knelt beside him and said, "Master, the wind is strong today. The leaves are falling." Ren smiled. "Let them. The wind only brings them home." The monk bowed his head. "Are you afraid?" Ren shook his head slowly. "How can I be afraid of returning?" The wind lifted around them, and the leaves danced through the air. As Ren took his final breath, one leaf broke free above him, spinning in the sunlight, carried effortlessly by the breeze. When the monks buried him, they placed his grave beneath the maple tree. Each autumn, the leaves fell over it like blessings, and the wind whispered softly through the branches. Those who visited the monastery would often stop to watch the leaves fall. They said they could hear Ren's voice in the wind, saying what he had once told all who came to him. "You are not falling, you are returning." Trust turns fear into flight. On a high mountain where the air was thin and cool, a monastery sat among the clouds. The wind there moved softly, carrying the sound of temple bells through the valley below. The monks who lived on that mountain had learned to live as the clouds did, quietly, without hurry, without grasping at what passed. Yet not all of them understood what that truly meant. Among the younger monks was one named Tao. He was sincere and hard-working, but his heart was restless. He longed to know his purpose, to understand where his life was going and what path he was meant to follow. Every morning, as the other monks prayed in silence, Tao's mind wandered toward questions. "What am I supposed to become?" he would think. "What if I waste my life not knowing where to go?" The monastery's master, an old monk named Ryokan, noticed this restlessness. He often saw Tao standing alone after meditation, gazing out at the horizon as if searching for an answer written in the distance. One morning, the master approached him. "Tao," he said softly, "you seem to be searching for something the eyes cannot see. What is it you are looking for?" Tao bowed deeply. "Master, I am trying to find my direction. I study, I meditate, I work, but I do not feel peace. I wonder what path I am meant to take. Everyone speaks of finding their way in life, but I do not know mine." The master nodded, his expression calm. "Come," he said, "walk with me." They left the temple grounds and followed a narrow path that wound up the mountain. The air grew colder as they climbed, and the clouds drifted low, wrapping around them like soft veils. At the summit, they stopped. The valley stretched below them, and the sky above was filled with drifting clouds, white and endless. "Look," said Master Ryokan, pointing to the sky. "Do you see how the clouds move?" Tao nodded. "Yes, Master. They travel with the wind." The master smiled. "Do they choose where to go?" Tao frowned slightly. "No, the wind carries them." "And yet," the master continued, "do they not reach everywhere? The mountains, the valleys, the rivers, they touch all places without striving?" Tao was silent. The master's words hung in the air like the clouds themselves, light, yet full of meaning. "Perhaps," the master said, turning to him, "you are too busy trying to choose your path when the universe is already carrying you along it." Tao lowered his gaze. "But master, how can I trust that? If I do nothing, how will I know I am going the right way?" The master chuckled softly. "Does the cloud ever worry about being lost?" Tao shook his head. "No, master." Ryokan nodded. "Then learn from it. The cloud does not resist the wind, yet it travels further than any man walking against it." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sky shift. The clouds drifted slowly, their shapes changing as they passed. Some gathered into great white towers, others thinned and vanished into the blue. Tao asked quietly, "Do they not disappear, master? If they keep moving, do they not lose themselves?" The old monk smiled. "They never lose themselves. They only change form. What falls as rain returns as mist. What becomes snow melts again into water. They are never gone, only transformed." Tao thought about this long after they returned to the monastery. That night, as he sat in meditation, he imagined himself as a cloud, weightless, carried by unseen forces, always changing yet never lost. For the first time, in many months, his heart felt lighter. But as days passed, his old restlessness returned. When the master asked him to sweep the courtyard, Tao found himself wondering if he should be studying instead. When he studied, he wished he were traveling. When he meditated, he wished he were doing something more. "How can I stop this?" he thought. "How can I find peace in not knowing where I am going?" One afternoon, he went to see Master Ryokan again. The old monk was sitting by a small pond, watching koi fish swim beneath the water's surface. "Master," Tao said, bowing, "I have tried to let go, but my heart is still restless. I cannot find peace. I feel I am wasting my life doing nothing." The master looked up from the pond. "Doing nothing?" he repeated. "You breathe, do you not?" "Yes," said Tao, surprised. "Does the breath need a destination?" the master asked. Tao blinked. "No, master. It simply flows." The master smiled faintly. "Then why do you?" Tao was silent. "Sit with me," Ryokan said. "Look at the fish." Together they watched the fish move through the water, graceful, unhurried. "Do they swim to reach something?" asked the master. "No," Tao said quietly. "They simply swim." The master nodded. "And yet they are never still. They move because life moves through them. To live is not to force movement, it is to allow it. You wish to find your path, but your path is already beneath your feet." Tao bowed his head. "Then I must stop seeking." "Stop seeking, and you will see," said the master. That night, Tao did not meditate as he usually did. Instead, he walked to the edge of the forest behind the monastery. The moon hung above the trees, and the clouds drifted slowly across the sky, glowing faintly in the silver light. The wind touched his face softly, cool and alive. He thought again of the clouds. They were always moving, yet never lost, always changing, yet always part of the same sky. He whispered to himself, "They travel nowhere, yet reach everywhere." The words felt true in a way that no teaching had before. From that night on, Tao began to live differently. When he swept the courtyard, he no longer rushed to finish. He listened to the broom's rhythm against the stones. When he ate, he tasted each grain of rice as if it were a gift. When he studied, he did not hurry to understand. He began to notice that when he stopped forcing things, understanding came naturally. The other monks began to notice a change in him. His movements grew slower, his eyes calmer. He no longer seemed burdened by the need to arrive anywhere. One day, a young novice asked him, "Brother Tao, you seem at peace. How did you find it?" Tao smiled. "I stopped searching for peace as if it was somewhere else." The novice frowned. "But don't we have to look for truth?" Tao laughed softly. "The truth doesn't hide. It's we who hide from it by chasing after it. Seasons passed. The mountains changed color, green to gold to white, then green again. The monastery remained quiet through it all, as steady as the sky. Tao grew older, but his heart stayed light. He often went to the same hilltop where the master had first taken him. There, he would sit for hours watching the clouds. Sometimes they covered the entire valley. Sometimes they vanished completely, leaving the sky clear and endless. One afternoon, Master Ryokan joined him there. The old monk's hair had turned silver, but his eyes still shone with the same gentle humor. "Tao," he said, "you spend many hours watching the clouds. Tell me, what do you see now that you did not see before?" Tao smiled. "Before, I saw shapes, dragons, ships, faces. Now I see nothing in them, only peace." The master nodded approvingly. "That is the way of wisdom, seeing through what the mind invents to the stillness that has been there all along." Tao looked out at the drifting sky. "Master, I think I understand now. The clouds do not search for the sky, they are already within it, and I do not need to search for my path. I am already walking it." Ryokan smiled. "Then your heart has come home." When the master passed away that winter, Tao did not weep. He went to the hilltop where they had once stood together and watched the clouds. The sky was grey that day, the wind soft and steady. Tao whispered a prayer. For his teacher, not of sorrow but of gratitude. "You have returned to the sky you always belonged to," he said. Years later, Tao became the monastery's new master. People came from far and wide to seek his guidance. Many of them asked the same questions he had once asked. "How do I find my purpose? How do I know where my life is going?" He would take them to the hilltop and point to the clouds drifting above. "Look," he would say. "Do they rush to arrive? Do they ask where they are going?" The visitors would shake their heads. "And yet," Tao continued, "they move across mountains and seas. They change from vapor to rain to snow. They feed the rivers, the soil, the air. Without plan, they fulfill every purpose." One traveler, a young woman burdened by uncertainty, asked him, "But Master, if I stop searching, won't I become lost?" Tao smiled gently. "You are not lost. You are the sky itself. You only forgot that you were never outside it." She bowed her head, tears filling her eyes. "Then how do I return?" "Return?" Tao said softly. "There is nowhere to return to. You are already home." The woman left that day with a heart lighter than when she arrived. As the years went on, Tao's teaching spread quietly through the valley. He was known as the monk who taught with clouds. When people worried about their lives, their choices, their futures, he would remind them, "The wind has always known your direction. Stop fighting it." He grew old beneath the same sky he had watched his entire life. Even as his body weakened, he never stopped climbing the hill to see the clouds. One day, as he sat there with a young monk, the wind began to rise. The sky filled with movement, and the clouds stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The young monk asked, "Master, do the clouds ever end?" Tao smiled faintly. "No, they only become the sky itself." "Will we too become the sky one day?" "Yes," Tao said, "we already are. We only forget because we keep looking down." The wind carried his words away, but the young monk never forgot them. When Tao passed away that spring, the monks held a simple ceremony. They placed his ashes on the hilltop, where he had always watched the clouds. That evening, the sky was clear, the air golden with sunset. A soft wind moved through the valley, lifting the mist into the air. One of the monks looked up and said quietly, "He is traveling nowhere, yet he has reached everywhere." The others bowed their heads in silence. The wind moved among them like a gentle blessing. From that day forward, whenever the monks felt lost or uncertain, they would climb the hill and watch the sky. And there, in the drifting of the clouds, they would remember what their old teacher had said, "You are not lost. you are part of the sky. When you stop seeking direction, your heart will arrive home. In a quiet temple at the edge of a mountain village, there lived an old monk named Haru. The monastery where he resided was known for its peace and simplicity. It stood beside a stream that whispered softly through stones, and each morning the monks would rise before dawn to chant, sweep the grounds, and begin their day in silence. Haru had lived in the temple for more than 50 years. He was gentle and patient, loved by the younger monks for his kindness and calm wisdom. His every movement carried grace, the way he poured tea, tended to the garden, and walked among the trees. Of all his possessions, Haru cherished one thing most: a small porcelain bowl that had been given to him when he was a young monk by his teacher, Master Ren. It was simple in design, with pale blue patterns along the rim, but it carried deep meaning for Haru. His master had said, "This bowl will teach you more about yourself than any scripture." For many years, Haru did not understand what his teacher meant, but every day since, he used it with great care. He washed it gently after every meal, dried it with a soft cloth, and placed it back on the same wooden shelf. To him, it was a reminder of his teacher's presence, of lessons once given and lessons still unfolding. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Haru sat quietly in his room. The air was cool, and the faint sound of crickets filled the space. He poured tea into his favorite bowl and watched the steam rise, curling in delicate shapes. As he lifted it to his lips, a sound startled him, a loud crack of thunder outside, though the sky was only half clouded. His hand trembled, and the bowl slipped from his fingers. It fell in slow motion, as if time itself hesitated to let it go. Then came the sound, sharp, final, clear, the bowl striking the stone floor and shattering into many pieces. For a long moment, Haru did not move. The broken pieces lay before him, the tea spreading in a small pool that reflected the dim light of his lantern. He felt a pang in his chest, not of anger, but of loss, something quiet, deep, and hollow. He knelt down, touching the fragments gently. His reflection appeared in the small puddles of tea scattered between the shards, his face multiplied, broken, and distorted. He sighed deeply. "So this is how the lesson ends," he whispered. The next morning, as the monks gathered for breakfast, they noticed Haru's empty space on the table. One of the younger monks approached him later in the garden. "Master Haru," he said softly, "we saw your bowl had broken. You must be sad. It was your favorite, wasn't it?" Haru smiled faintly. "Yes, it was," he said. "But sadness is not the whole story." The young monk frowned. "Then what is the rest of it?" Haru gestured to the garden around them. The morning sun glowed through the leaves, and the dew sparkled on the grass. "The bowl has returned to the earth," he said. "It was always part of it, clay, shaped by hands, hardened by fire. I cared for it, yes, but it was never truly mine. The breaking only showed me what was always true, that nothing I touch belongs to me." The young monk looked confused. "But you used it every day. Didn't it mean something to you?" "It did," Haru said. "But meaning is not ownership. Love does not mean holding tightly. Sometimes it means letting the world move as it must." The monk bowed, though he did not fully understand. That afternoon, Haru went back to his room. The broken pieces of the bowl were still there, laid neatly on a cloth. He had cleaned the spilled tea and washed each fragment carefully, as if still honoring what remained. He sat quietly and gazed at them, noticing how even in their shattered form, each piece still caught the light beautifully. He could still see himself reflected in the glossy surface, not as a whole, but in many small, shimmering images. "Each piece still shows me," he said softly. "How strange that I should see myself more clearly now than before." He thought of his teacher, Master Ren, and the day he had first received the bowl. He remembered asking then, "Why give me something so fragile?" And the master had replied, because you are fragile too. And one day, you must see that breaking is not the opposite of wholeness. It is part of it. Now, all these years later, Haru finally understood. He picked up one of the fragments and held it to the light. It was small enough to fit between his fingers, but within it, he could still see the patterns that once circled the entire bowl. "You are still beautiful," he whispered to it, "even in pieces." That evening, when the sun was low, Haru went to the workshop near the temple. The monastery kept old pottery tools and brushes for the monks to repair cracked teacups or mend small dishes. Haru mixed a bit of gold powder with sap lacquer, a method his teacher had once shown him. With slow, careful strokes, he began to fit the pieces of the bowl together again. It took him days. The cracks remained, of course, but Haru did not hide them. Instead, he filled each one with golden lines, sealing the bowl not to restore what was lost, but to honor what had changed. When it was finished, the bowl gleamed softly, its cracks shining like rivers of sunlight. When the other monks saw it, they marveled. "It's more beautiful now than before," they said. Haru smiled gently. "It is beautiful because it has lived," he replied. "The gold does not erase its wounds, it shows them." He placed the bowl back on his shelf, but he never used it again. Instead, he let it sit by the window, where the morning light could touch it. Each day, when he rose to meditate, the golden lines glowed softly in the sunlight. To Haru, it was a quiet reminder that nothing broken is ever truly lost. One evening, a young monk named Jun came to see him. Jun had been struggling with grief since the death of his brother months earlier. He carried his sorrow like a heavy stone, unable to let it go. "Master Haru," he said, bowing, "how do I live when the things I love keep breaking? My heart feels like your bowl in pieces." Haru gestured for him to sit. "Tell me," he said gently, "what happens when a wave crashes against the shore?" Jun frowned. "It disappears." "Does it truly?" Haru asked. "Or does it return to the ocean it came from?" Jun was quiet. "The same is true of love," Haru said. "What you have lost has not vanished. It has returned to the hole from which it came. You cannot hold the wave in your hand, but you can feel its presence in the sea." Jun looked at the repaired bowl beside them. The golden cracks glowed in the lamplight. "Then the bowl," he said softly, "it's like us." "Yes," Haru replied. "Every life will break in some way. Hearts, hopes, dreams, even our bodies all will crack. But those cracks are where the light can enter. When we stop wishing for unbroken things, we begin to see beauty even in the fragments." Jun bowed deeply, tears shining in his eyes. "Then my grief is not wrong." "No," Haru said. "Grief is love trying to take a new form. It is the proof that what you cared for still lives in you." The boy left lighter that night, and Haru sat for a long time in silence, gazing at the bowl. It had been made by human hands, but its story belonged to the universe, to the clay, the fire, the air, and the water. And now, even broken, it continued to serve a purpose. It was teaching. Seasons passed. Haru grew older, his hands slower. One winter morning, as snow fell softly outside the temple, he held the bowl again and smiled. "You and I have grown together," he whispered. "We have both learned to carry our cracks with grace." That night, the monks gathered in the hall for evening tea. Haru joined them, his movements slow but steady. As they sat together, one of the younger monks asked, "Master, what do you see when you look at your bowl now?" Haru smiled. "I see myself," he said. "Not as I was when I was young, smooth and certain, but as I am now, shaped by time, touched by loss, but still whole." He paused, then added, "The bowl reminds me that wholeness is not the absence of cracks. It is the ability to hold together even with them." The monks sat in thoughtful silence, each one reflecting on the words. That night, Haru dreamed of his teacher again. In the dream, Master Ren stood before him, holding the bowl as it once was, flawless, new. He smiled and said, You have learned well, my student. You have seen that breaking does not destroy what is real. The true vessel was never the bowl, but your heart. Haru woke with tears on his cheeks and gratitude in his heart. He went to the window, where the first light of dawn was touching the horizon. The snow outside had stopped, and the world was silent except for the soft drip of melting ice. He picked up the bowl one last time and held it to the sunlight. The golden cracks gleamed like threads of fire. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing me that even broken things can shine." When Haru passed away later that spring, the monks placed the bowl beside his body during the funeral ceremony. They buried him under the old cherry tree that blossomed every year beside the stream. In springtime, when the petals fell, they covered his grave like soft rain. Years later, new monks came to live at the monastery. They found the golden bowl displayed on a shelf in the meditation hall. None of them had known Haru personally, but they felt peace whenever they looked at it. The cracks, shining gently in the light, reminded them of something deep and wordless, that beauty does not depend on perfection, and that loss is only the universe changing shape. When travelers visited, they often asked the monks about the bowl's story. One of the elders would smile and say, "Once it was broken, now it teaches us that breaking does not end a thing's purpose, it only reveals it." In time, the bowl became part of the monastery's legend. Pilgrims would come from far away to see it, not because it was rare or expensive, but because it carried the quiet truth that all people shared, that we are all vessels of light, even when cracked. When the sun shone through the temple windows in the late afternoon, its rays would touch the bowl, and the golden lines would gleam softly, like sunlight on water. The monks would pause to look at it and remember Master Haru's words, "Each piece still shows me. Loss only divides what was always whole." And as they returned to their prayers, they carried that truth within them, that nothing in this world is ever truly lost. What breaks simply returns to its place in the greater whole, shining all the brighter for having been broken. As the candlelight fades and the final story settles in your heart, take a slow breath and feel the stillness that remains. These gentle Buddhist stories have whispered timeless truths, that surrender is not weakness but wisdom. The empty cup taught us that peace begins when we stop trying to control. The bamboo and the storm showed us that bending is not breaking. The monk and the river reminded us that trust is the art of waiting for the right moment. The lost horse revealed that life's good and bad are only the same story at different times. The monk's shadow showed us that the light never leaves what walks within it. The raindrop's journey reminded us that we are never separate from the whole. The master's silence taught us that the universe speaks loudest when we become still enough to listen. The fisherman's net showed that losing is sometimes the beginning of truly seeing. The stone and the stream taught that every hardship polishes us into clarity. The candle and the sun revealed that we are not the light's source, only its keeper. The butterfly's cocoon reminded us that true growth cannot be rushed. The falling leaf showed us that letting go is how we return home. The cloud's path taught us that when we stop seeking, we arrive. And the broken bowl reminded us that what breaks does not lose its beauty, it only reveals its light. Each of these stories is a quiet doorway into trust. Trust in timing, in transformation, and in the mysterious wisdom of the universe. When you stop resisting life's flow, you begin to see that every ending carries a beginning, every loss carries a gift, and every breath brings you home to peace. If one of these stories touched you or helped you see your own life a little more clearly, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know which lesson stayed with you. And if you'd like more stories like these, gentle reminders to breathe, surrender, and trust, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The universe is still speaking. Stay open, stay soft, and let it carry you exactly where you're meant to be.